Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 76, The Revolutionists. Vengeance will be mine. Eula Batman. It's more than just not planning to return to the main game. We're gathered here to discuss how to launch a counterattack against the City of Glory and ruin the official Oath team's already garbage reputation, Ryan said, stating the reason for their gathering. Personally, I can accept the account bans to some extent. After all, the power level of the spirits in Pokemon is indeed a bit overtuned. Crimson Knight belonged to the more level-headed group of players. But many village players have never even been to the City of Glory, yet their main accounts were still banned. That part is completely unreasonable. Anyway, I don't accept it. If you want to appeal the ban, you have to delete all your Netherworld village data first. What right does the official Oath team have to dictate what we're allowed to play? Macchiato was filled with righteous indignation. She kept tapping the table with small movements of her hand, silently venting her frustration. The constant clicking from the other side was probably the sound effect from Mio's floating keyboard settings. This was not the first time Carl had seen Mio with such a terrifying expression. Judging by her face, she was probably arguing on the online forum with players who supported the official Oath team's bans. Mio's expression at that moment practically screamed, "Say that again and see what happens." So, shopkeeper, what should we do? Why don't we all gather in Crimson Knight's open world and head straight to the City of Glory to settle things with the official Oath team? A Crimson Sigil player suggested. Yeah, shopkeeper, we all support you. The Pokemon DLC you released just gave us real combat power too. Let's go to the City of Glory and blow those bastards away. Do you know how long it takes to earn back the rank points lost from a single defeat in the main game's Trial of Glory? A day. It took me a whole damn day to get them back. Shopkeeper, give the order. You mean issue the quest. For the shopkeeper, it's time to shoot down the sun and wipe out the pests. How can a game possibly be run well with those parasites from the official Oath team in charge? We nominate the shopkeeper as the new operator of Oath. All hail the shopkeeper. Looking at the increasingly indignant players in the meeting room, Carl really wanted to say, "You people are making this very difficult for me." Everyone, calm down first. I know everyone gathered here wants an explanation from the official Oath team, but there are also far more new Netherworld village players who came here purely to enjoy the game. Carl calmly tried to dissuade the group of reckless strategists in front of him. First of all, I support the decision to settle things with the City of Glory, but the method is wrong. Even if we truly conquered the City of Glory, it wouldn't cause any real harm to the official Oath team. Carl was actually quite moved to see so many players willing to stand by his side despite the heavy pressure of the bans. Well, the number was not actually that large. Only about 5,000 people or so. Compared to the main Oath player base, these core Netherworld village players were still far too few. These players were almost all Carl's diehard supporters, willing to go to war with Oath for his sake. But most Netherworld village players were truly just here to play the game. Shopkeeper, do you mean the number of people you can currently mobilize is insufficient? At that moment, Vengeful Blood said something that once again made Carl break into a cold sweat and left him a little speechless. That's true. The vast majority of Netherworld village players won't be like you, willing to abandon everything in Oath for the sake of another game. Miss Player, I have never seen you as soldiers. Carl said this after wiping away the non-existent cold sweat from his forehead. But indeed, just as she said, there are still too few diehard players willing to give everything for Netherworld village. So once war breaks out, we are certain to lose. Carl did not actually want to speak in such absolute terms, so he shared his thoughts with the players present as clearly as possible. Because he wanted to give every player as much freedom of choice as possible. Whether they liked playing Oath or Netherworld village, either was fine. But the official Oath team simply refused to give players a choice, stubbornly demanding that they choose between Oath and Netherworld village. Unfortunately, at this stage, even though the number of Netherworld village players was skyrocketing. Just like Vengeful Blood, if their anonymous alt profiles were exposed, they would still choose to return to Oath's embrace without hesitation. So please, do not blame those players who might abandon Netherworld village in favor of Oath. Carl said this while turning his gaze toward Vengeful Blood. There are indeed many things in Oath that they cannot bear to part with. Well, although Carl spoke so righteously, the main reason he could think of for players refusing to abandon Oath was most likely because they had spent money on it. If I could sell my account, I would have quit ages ago. JPG. Guys, calm down. Attacking the City of Glory directly right now really has no meaning. We can't win, and we'll just make ourselves look ridiculous. Ryan spoke up at this moment, calming down the surrounding players. Then he looked at Carl again with a meaningful gaze. But just sitting here and taking it isn't my style either. So, shopkeeper, you must have some ideas, right? A way to recruit more diehard supporters to our side while also damaging the official Oath team. Ryan pulled up a chair and handed the stage over to Carl. Why did Carl feel like he was holding a shareholders meeting? Regarding that, I've actually been planning something for a while. Carl dutifully told this group of armchair generals the real way to conquer the City of Glory. First, after anonymous mode was enabled, the number of players in Netherworld Village surged. Now, it basically maintains a stable 700,000 to 800,000 players online, and that number is still rising rapidly. But the official Oath team's softban strategy makes most players afraid to admit they are village players, so they can only play in secret. The result is that when we truly propose to attack the City of Glory, not many players will likely stand on our side. The reality Carl was describing was exactly that. Most ordinary Oath players still only saw Netherworld Village as a side mode. It was fine for casual fun, but if they were really forced to choose between the village and their waifus in the main game of Oath, most players would choose the latter. So what do you plan to do, shopkeeper? I don't think the account bans will stop here. At least give us some way to fight back, Crimson Knight said. And secure more allies. Crimson Knight was truly and seriously considering the matter of conquering the City of Glory and fighting the official Oath team. Unfortunately, the members of the Navigator Guild were completely insignificant in the face of Oath's massive scale. It's simple. First, the way to convert those casual fans who come to Netherworld Village into diehard fans is to do what Oath has always done, let the players establish an emotional connection with the village. Carl gave the simplest solution. Don't you see it? Oath has always used gacha characters to build emotional bonds with players. Now, when players go to war, they all shout things like, for the Saintess, for the Saintess's mentor, for the smug brat loudly crying, for Mama Hasumi, and so on. In Carl's view, players had always been an easy group to understand. As long as there was a character they felt deeply attached to, they would be willing to fight for her. Chapter 77, It's Me Right. So, we just need to create a group of charismatic characters who can accompany the villager players and build deep bonds with them. Carl gave a solution that sounded simple, but was actually extremely difficult to implement. When Hasumi, who had been silently standing guard in the meeting room, heard the phrase, a group of charismatic characters, she made a strange noise. Ahem. Cough, cough, cough. Hasumi stepped out from the shadows as she spoke. It seems my long efforts in accompanying the saviors can finally shine today. Lord Carl, I am ready. Hasumi was still in her usual sparkling state. It seemed she had earned quite a few sacred contract stones recently and used them to strengthen herself. It's not time for your SP form to debut yet. The charismatic character I'm referring to is this. Carl reached out and grabbed Silly Cat, who had been following Vengeful Blood. I'm boss's partner, meow. I don't team up with anyone else, NYA. Silly Cat was very loyal, firmly stating that it would only follow Vengeful Blood and no one else. I'm just using it as an example. I think everyone already knows about the new Pokemon DLC. This DLC is not just about providing combat power in the Trial of Glory. It has its own long-term progression system. Carl released the struggling Silly Cat. Although the Abyssal Knights and some refugees from the City of Glory had already been contracted by Netherworld Village players as spirits from the original Oath game through shapeshifting potions, those spirits were all temporary. To establish a deeper emotional connection with the players, Carl needed to create pets that truly belonged to the players in every sense of the word. So, Carl took out a paid contract stone. Feeling that one might not be enough, he increased the number to 10. It seemed Elysium also felt that the official Oath team's softban policy was not exactly fair. As a master of balance, Elysium bestowed upon Carl the most important ability of a game designer. The creation of life. The data volume of 10 paid contract stones was about 100, and data volume was the essence of everything in this world. It was the primordial soup of life. Under Carl's guidance, these 10 paid contract stones decomposed and melted, gradually forming the skeleton, internal organs, muscles, skin, and fur of a small living creature. Then, after Carl input the creature's habits, personality, abilities, and several paths for evolution and growth, one of the most iconic images in video game history was born. Pi, the yellow-furred mouse lay in Carl's palms. Because Carl's palms were too small, it stood up after stretching and opened its pitch-black eyes to observe the world. So cute. What is this? What is this? It feels even cuter than Oath's mascot. Macchiato was the first to crowd around. With Carl's permission, she picked up the fluffy little creature. Let's call it Pikachu. Though Pikachu should probably be considered part of a broader electric mouse family, Carl said. So, shopkeeper, are you planning to rely on creating these electric mice to undermine the City of Glory from the inside? Ryan also stepped forward, wanting to touch Pikachu's nose, only to be shocked until his whole body trembled. No, no, my original intention in designing these spirits was simply to bring you joy. After this, I will design hundreds, even thousands, of spirits with different forms. You can catch and train them just like you catch monsters in the original Oath game. At the same time, they can also have various new evolved forms. As Carl spoke, he shaped the image of a small dinosaur with a flame burning on its tail. At the same time, Carl spent 10 sacred contract stones to summon a corresponding Charizard with a data volume of about 1000. Then you can use your own spirits for battles, social interaction, obtaining various rewards, and other gameplay modes. Is that how it works? Vengeful Blood glanced at Ryan, whose face was covered in black soot. Just catching the various monsters from the base game of Oath is already motivating enough. These little creatures also fill the gap where beginners can't catch powerful monsters early on. Tisk. This really is impossible to resist. At that moment, Hyo, who had been silent on the side, finally spoke up and asked Carl. So how exactly do we counterattack? Do we rely on these spirits to fight the base game Oath players? Hyo was not a warmonger. He simply thought it would be fun to challenge the official game of Oath from the disadvantaged position of a villager. No, you don't need to go to war with anyone. To be precise, you only need to battle other villagers. Carl revealed the method that would truly strike at Oath's weak point. After this, I'll find a way to release these spirits into the City of Glory, including setting up various battle arenas there. Not just in the Trial of Glory, but even in the open world of the City of Glory itself. What you need to do is simply have fun in the high-population open worlds. Whether it's Netherworld Village's scavenger gameplay, or catching spirits and battling other villager players in Pokémon. Carl spoke of what the official Oath team truly feared. You only need to show the base game players of Oath how fun descent into Netherworld Village and Pokémon are. Attract passing players to watch your Pokémon battles and make them ask, "Where did you catch that little pet? I want to play too." That is all you need to do. Carl's final summary was met with enthusiastic applause, just as expected. But the applause was interrupted by a sudden question from Mio. So, when can we play it? I'll start working hard from now on to create these spirit species and their ecosystems. I'll do my best to get it online as soon as possible. Just as Carl started to feel as though Mio was about to lock him in a dev room and force him to work around the clock, he suddenly received a message from Anon. The scriptwriter for Oath spoke with me today and gave me a very compelling script. I'm actually considering entering the Oath Gacha pool. Do you have time? I'm curious about your opinion on this script. Of course, although I'm a bit busy right now, I am indeed curious about what kind of script could actually convince you. Carl replied instantly without thinking, even though his work on creating spirits had not stopped. But Carl's main consciousness rushed to the main world at light speed to see what kind of amazing script the Oath scriptwriter had written to successfully make Anon consider becoming a gacha character. Chapter 78, Dragon Fetishism. Only at moments like this did Carl truly appreciate how useful it was for a digital lifeform to split its consciousness into multiple parts and still function as if nothing had changed. The place where Carl met Anon again was still beneath the shadow of the city wall. Anon stood atop the wall, perched on a wooden crate as she gazed out over the bustling nightscape of the City of Glory. Because this was the main world, the streets and alleyways of the City of Glory felt surprisingly lived in. It reminded Carl of theme park staff relaxing after closing time. Want a drink? When Anon saw Carl arrive, she tossed him a bottle of wine that looked rather decent. I don't usually drink, but this time, Carl opened the bottle right away and gently tapped it against the one in Anon's hand. This bottle of wine had a data volume of 2,700. And what did that mean? It meant that if this bottle of wine somehow turned into a monster, it could punch through the entire table, then grab the drinker by the collar and demand, "What exactly are you drinking? Say it, what are you drinking?" The flavor is certainly complicated. Carl took a small sip of the wine, whose vintage he could not identify. Bitterness and sweetness spread across his tongue at the same time. "I brought this up from the abyssal frontier. Don't worry, it's been purified. But you don't seem especially affected by the plague." Anon took a long swig straight from the bottle. Clearly, being a heavy drinker was probably part of her character setting. However, the role Anon was currently playing, a little flower girl, was not exactly suited to openly chugging wine from the bottle. In any case, this wine has too many data volume impurities. I can't absorb much from it. By now, Carl had figured out what problems arose when an item's data volume decreased. Food was the most obvious example. When a food item's data volume dropped, it lost all flavor. For ordinary objects, the most noticeable effect was a decline in visual quality, making them look like pixelated, low-resolution assets. However, their shape, weight, and texture remained unchanged. Elysium was probably using some clever optimization tricks, things like DLSS, supersampling, or similar techniques. Those optimization methods likely made low data items appear perfectly normal to both players and in-game characters. Thinking of this, Carl took the opportunity to ask Anon the question he cared about most. How did beings in Elysium level up? Aside from directly absorbing sacred contract stones and premium contract stones, how did the inhabitants of Elysium increase their level? This was crucial for the leveling and evolution system Carl was currently designing for the Pokémon. You don't know? Then I'll just assume you're some minor noble from the countryside who has never seen a real war. Anon thought for a moment, then made a light chopping motion with her hand. The way we increase our data volume, or level up, as the saviors call it, is very simple. We kill other beings and siphon data volume from them. Straightforward progression logic, isn't it? Isn't that too easy? If a powerful being kept devouring other people's data volume, wouldn't they just become unstoppable? Carl felt there had to be some kind of restriction, or more precisely, some horrifying consequence. Yes, data volume taken from living beings always contains impurities, whether that being is infected by the Calamity Plague or not. No. Perhaps that is one of the sources of the Calamity Plague. Anon's gaze drifted back to the civilians resting on the streets below. Once you siphon too much data volume through killing, your very existence begins to be contaminated. That is the line dividing the weak from the strong. Those who can withstand constant contamination become the revered ascendants. Other than that, there is also the method of refining one's skills to increase data volume, but that path is slow. It is nowhere near as fast as killing enemies with your own hands on the battlefield. As she spoke, Anon took out a premium contract stone and a sacred contract stone, weighing them in her palm. That is why contract stones, crystals of pure data volume, are such precious resources to us. As for those born under Elysium's blessing, the banner units, as the saviors call them, they are granted powerful abilities, data volume, and unique lives from the moment they are created. Anon's tone suddenly took on a hint of pride as she took another drink. But even with Elysium's blessing, becoming a true apex existence is far from easy. That is probably why the headmaster's faction is so eager to recruit us. Hearing this, Carl asked Anon another critical question, one driven by his own curiosity. Then what about the players, I mean, the saviors? Where does their data volume come from? If an average player wailed for a base copy unit with signature gear, that character's data volume would usually be around 6,000 to 10,000. A fully duped unit with maxed signature gear could be pushed straight to around 19,000 to 25,000. A data volume starting at 20,000 was already enough to place someone among the elite powers of Elysium. After all, Hasumi's initial data volume had only been around 11,000. The saviors are unaffected by impurities. They can absorb the power of other beings without limit. The only thing that restricts a savior's growth is the vessel they use as a game character. You understand what that means now, don't you? Anon spoke of an ability that would likely make every NPC in Elysium sick with envy. Having a real flesh and blood brain really did have its advantages. It would not be corroded or influenced by data corruption and all sorts of bugs. Carl's growth worked in a similar way. The only difference was that his body, the vessel carrying that power, required strict training in order to keep up with the rate at which he absorbed power. That was also why Carl felt exhausted every time he consumed a sacred contract stone. Processing that stuff consumed far too much physical energy. I see. Then I roughly know how to design the spirit leveling system. The spirits Carl had previously created only had a data volume of around 100. Players would definitely need to take them along and level them up, and the method was simple. Although it sounded a little cruel, it was essentially a matter of devouring the data volume of monsters. Those monsters could come from the original Oath game, or from other spirits. Of course, for defeated wild spirits, Carl would make sure they retained at least 10 points of data volume. He would also provide various berries to help them quickly recover their original strength. He would think of other leveling methods later. At the same time, Carl needed to build habitats in Netherworld Village, and even in the wilderness around the City of Glory, so the spirits would have places to live. But habitats were not easy to create, especially if he wanted players to experience this gameplay on Oath's main map. That would likely come with plenty of complications. Still, Carl was not in a rush. He could build it little by little when the time came. As for the contamination issue, Carl could set a soft level cap that players would not easily notice once contamination reached a critical threshold. However, the spirits themselves did not need to worry too much about contamination. The fun players gained while playing would naturally purify the contamination inside the spirits. Once the spirits Carl created became stronger, they could go directly after the data volume of monsters from the original Oath. Although the monsters around the City of Glory were all creatures contaminated by the Calamity Plague, as long as the gameplay was fun enough, the purification speed would naturally keep pace. Thank you for the information, Ms. Anon. Now it's my turn to advise you. I'm also quite curious about what kind of storyline Oath's official team has written for you. Carl finally guided the conversation toward the real topic. When official business came up, Anon suddenly hesitated. She pressed her lips together, then drained the rest of the wine in one go before turning her gaze toward Carl, as if she had finally made up her mind. Before we talk about the storyline, I want you to see what I truly look like now, and the real situation that I and the Abyssal Knights are facing. No problem, I've seen plenty of patience eroded by the Calamity virus. Whatever your true form is, I can accept it. Carl also knew that Anon's current appearance as a little flower girl was only a disguise. In his imagination, her true form was probably that of a battle-hardened woman in pitch-black armor. Take my hand, I will bring you into my mindscape. You could also call it a domain. Every truly powerful being in Elysium is a walking disaster, and I am no exception. Anon jumped down from the wooden crate and extended her small, childlike hand to Carl. Carl took Anon's hand without much fear. In the next instant, he understood what she meant by a walking disaster. The prosperous scenery of the City of Glory vanished in an instant. Pitch-black flames surged toward Carl. Everything around him seemed to burn away into nothingness. When the chaos settled, the sky, the ground, and the surrounding landscape had all changed. The world had become a stretch of scorched earth ravaged by fire. And on that scorched earth sat a giant dragon covered in black scales. I hope I didn't scare you. This is already the result of me suppressing the virus's erosion as much as possible and controlling my form to appear closer to normal human aesthetics. Anon's massive dragon head leaned down. Her golden pupils were nearly half as large as Carl himself. How could I be scared? Ms. Anon, this form of yours, I honestly can't think of any word for it except beautiful. After seeing Anon's true form, Carl truly could not stop himself from reaching out and touching the smooth scales beneath Anon's chin. Most gamers had a soft spot for dragons, and Carl was no exception. Chapter 79, Good Girl Anon. Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? Anon pulled her head away in mild disgust. Perhaps, in her eyes, this form of hers was the very image of disaster itself. It's not a joke. So, Ms. Anon, now that you've finished showing off your dragon transformation, what exactly is bothering you? Carl knew that Anon was being driven by a certain anxiety. That anxiety was what had made her hesitate over whether she should accept Oath's official storyline and become a featured gacha unit. This is what's bothering me, Anon said, her voice muffled in her dragon form. Under the plague's erosion, I'm no longer sure I can keep maintaining my human form, or my sanity. Once I lose control, the entire City of Glory, no, this entire region, will become a wasteland. Even the Abyssal Knights will be affected by me. They'll turn into monsters, and this whole area will become another abyssal frontier. Based on Carl's understanding, the abyssal frontier referred to regions that had been overrun by monsters infected with the Calamity Plague. In the later stages, Elysium would need to send in players, or groups like Anon's Abyssal Knights, to relocate all those monsters. If relocation was impossible, they would have to kill them by force, seal them in a state of suspended animation, and then transport them elsewhere. Only after that could the region be discarded into Netherworld Village. So you're afraid that if you lose your sanity, you'll rampage in this catastrophic form and destroy everything around you. In that case, Ms. Anon, wouldn't it be better to release your anger and negative emotions while you're still sane? Carl's next words made Anon's pupils contract. She lowered her dragon head toward Carl again and questioned him in a deep, muffled voice. Do you understand what you're saying? I mean it exactly as I said it. Ms. Anon, there's no need to keep hiding your true form. Just let out all the emotions you've been holding back. There truly was a strange, almost sinister charm in Carl's voice. It was the kind of voice that could tempt someone toward corruption. Even if it destroys the City of Glory and everything around it, let it out. Becoming a world-ending boss sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? Wouldn't a normal resident of Elysium, after seeing Anon's calamitous form, do everything possible to convince her to suppress her emotions so she would not destroy the beauty around her? But Carl's answer was simple. Then destroy it, because that would be more interesting. I know you have plenty of resentment toward the Holy Nation, but the people of the Holy Nation are still living, breathing human beings. If I go berserk, none of the residents in the City of Glory region will survive, Anon said, her tone turning extremely serious. Don't worry about that, I'll have the players evacuate them in advance. Whether it means relocating the residents of the City of Glory or providing them with shelter, as long as you give me an early warning, Ms. Anon, I'll do everything I can to save them. Carl was quite confident about this. After all, Netherworld Village was currently desperately short on manpower. If the residents of the City of Glory moved there as spirits, or even in their original NPC forms, the players would definitely welcome them. So you're saying it doesn't matter if I become a monster, and it doesn't matter if my Abyssal Knights become mindless beasts, simply because it would be interesting. Anon still could not understand why Carl was encouraging her to destroy everything. Of course not, Ms. Anon, didn't you come to the City of Glory to cure the Calamity Plague inside you? Carl pointed out the reason Anon had been pushed into this corner in the first place. You came here to cure it by absorbing the player's positive emotions. But the reason you're so troubled is probably that, at this stage, you've discovered that none of those emotions can truly cure you. Not the excitement of pulling a rare unit, not the satisfaction of completing a side quest, not even the relief of clearing an extreme abyss challenge. But you know the players can produce an emotion that does help you. You must have absorbed it before. Let me guess, it's the sense of achievement and exhilaration they feel after winning an intense PvP match in the Trial of Glory. Carl's analysis silenced Anon instantly. A low rumble came from her throat, as if signaling for Carl to continue. But the amount of that emotion is too small. The TTK, time to kill, in Oath's PvP is extremely short. Because of the game's stat inflation, a match between two-player teams can basically be decided within 2 minutes. Add in the imbalance caused by pay-to-win mechanics, and emotions like the thrill of battle or the satisfaction of defeating a powerful opponent become even rarer. At this point in his analysis, Carl finally found an opportunity to reach out and touch the dragon's scales beneath Anon's chin. In that instant, Carl felt Anon's entire body tremble slightly. Even the ground shook for a brief moment. So, Ms. Anon, you can absolutely use this form to let the players challenge you. Anon had also considered the method Carl mentioned. She lightly ground her teeth together, sending out a small burst of sparks, then said, "What good would a challenge do? In my eyes, the saviors are nothing more than a group of spoiled children. Their battles in the City of Glory right now are just make-believe. In that mode called Extreme Abyss, if my Abyssal Knights show even a fraction of their true strength, the saviors immediately start complaining that all the budget went into the monsters. The headmaster's side has been constantly reminding us to hold back as much as possible in this version, just so the saviors won't feel humiliated after being crushed." After hearing Anon's complaints, the corners of Carl's mouth curled upward again before he could stop himself. That's normal. Oath's combat system itself isn't fun. Most of the time, players are only interacting with a character's numbers. And those numbers are bought with real money through pay-to-win systems. Carl patiently explained why the players reacted so strongly. Anon could understand the terms Carl used, such as players and pay-to-win. So when the Abyssal Knights reveal stats that completely overpower the players naturally complain that the Abyss monsters are power creeping way too fast. They say things like, even my 6+5 Hasumi can't beat this. Hearing this, Anon once again turned her massive golden vertical pupils toward Carl and asked, even when I make my Abyssal Knights hold back as much as possible, the saviors still complain that it's too hard. It's as if, to the saviors, suffering even the slightest setback in battle, or failing to steamroll a true apex tier enemy, is some enormous injustice. How can you guarantee that when my Abyssal Knights and I face the saviors at full strength, they'll give everything they have to defeat us instead of running away? This was what Anon was truly worried about. Once she and her Abyssal Knights went berserk, Oath's official team would never treat them as open-world bosses for players to fight. They would be far too difficult for the current version's players. They would simply be abandoned, discarded like trash in places the players would never reach. All of this is because Oath's combat system isn't interesting enough. It's not that players can't handle hardship, and it's not that they can't handle challenging real powerhouses. It's because Oath's combat system doesn't encourage players to defeat powerful enemies through their own skill. It's purely a stat check. At this point, Carl made a promise to Anon in an extremely serious tone. So even if you don't believe me right now, that's fine. But I promise you, if you ever go berserk, I will design a system for the players. A system that lets the weak overcome the strong, and lets them experience the pure thrill of combat. Let them challenge you, let them give everything they have to defeat you. What they'll gain is the joy of overcoming a powerful enemy, a feeling 100 times more addictive and exhilarating than these make-believe battles in Oath. Hearing this, Anon wavered once again. Carl approached Anon again. After receiving her consent, he pressed his cheek against her scales and whispered to her. So, Ms. Anon, you aren't trapped without a way out. If you can no longer suppress the anger in your heart, then release it. Destroy everything around you. Anon's enormous body trembled slightly again. At that moment, she deeply understood how terrifying Carl Agata truly was. It was as if Carl were whispering into the ear of her, a living catastrophe. Kind Anon, pure Anon, good girl Anon, obedient girl Anon, go ahead and rampage to your heart's content. It doesn't matter even if you destroy everything. Because I will save you. My players will save you. Of course, remember to tell me in advance. I'll begin the rescue operation first. Destroying the City of Glory is one thing, but we can't allow innocent civilians to get hurt, Carl added. I don't need you to remind me, Anon replied, although she did not immediately agree to Carl's proposal. At this point, Anon and Carl left her mindscape together. She also transformed from that kingdom-ending dragon back into the form of the little flower girl. She had thought her true form would frighten Carl. To her surprise, she was the one who ended up being frightened. So, what kind of storyline did Oath's writers prepare for you? Can you show it to me now? Carl had already extended his olive branch to Anon. Now it was time to see what kind of olive branch Oath had offered her. Here, Anon handed Carl an extremely thick script, along with Oath's future version roadmap. Allow me to critique it. Carl immediately began flipping through the script in the roadmap. Chapter 80, Power of Love. May you bear witness, Stella. Urash. Although the script was unsigned, Carl could not tell whether Kuro had written it. Still, the script itself was incredibly powerful. It portrayed the countless sacrifices the Abyssal Knights had made while defending the border. Even after the plague corrupted them into monsters, they remained the final line of defense, holding back the creatures that tried to invade the city. If their hands twisted into claws and they could no longer wield swords, they used those claws to tear their enemies apart. If fangs pierced through their helmets, they ripped off their armor and sank their teeth into the monsters before them. They would rather become monsters themselves than let the people they protected face even the slightest threat. The story was tragic, heroic, and deeply stirring. It also included flashbacks to an earlier age, telling the tale of the first commander of the Abyssal Knights, who continued guarding the last line of defense even after becoming a monster, never allowing it to fall. Finally, the story returned to Anon with the familiar but effective line, "I'm beyond saving. Kill me." Then came the player's final response. "Leave the rest to me." After that, the player would stand alone against the surging tide of the Calamity Plague. It was the perfect setup for players to show off, get fired up, and feel completely satisfied. And when it came to selling a character, the script pulled no punches. First, Anon's banner art showed her current appearance, which was her childhood form. Her aloof but secretly caring personality, combined with the appearance of a beautiful young girl and the mindset of a weary middle-aged man, was written surprisingly well. It would probably make a lot of players fall for her at first sight. It really is well written. Carl did not hold back his praise and nodded several times. Just reading the script is enough to get me hyped. Pair this with strong story presentation and high-quality CGs, and it could easily become a landmark update for Oath. Even years from now, people would still remember it as Oath's peak version. The writer only recorded the everyday lives of us Abyssal Knights, Anon said, a hint of pride in her voice. Yeah, I think I understand why you're tempted, Ms. Anon. Carl flipped through the later plans for the update and found that Oath currently had two possible development paths. The first was to open the Empire storyline, which had been the original plan. The second was to continue the Holy Nation storyline and begin the arc of the Abyssal Knights. If this update launches successfully, the Abyssal Knights will definitely attract a huge number of Savior fans. They'll all be proud to join your order. After all, when Carl played games in the past, he would always choose to join any faction or organization he especially liked. If the game did not let him join, he would at least wear their uniform and cosplay as one of them. The gameplay plans for the later updates are also pretty strong, assuming they aren't just empty promises. Carl glanced at Oath's roadmap and saw that the developers seemed serious about improving the gameplay. Both the Empire update and the Abyssal Knights update included several major gameplay expansions. Although Carl felt it would be going too far to take credit for all of this. There was no doubt, however, that the gameplay direction of Netherworld Village had given Oath's official team a sense of crisis. That was why they were planning to hand out more rewards in later updates and add more interesting gameplay systems to keep players from leaving. So you think it's fine, right? As long as I get added to a banner later, the Abyssal Knights will gain a huge wave of new recruits from the Saviors. Only then did Anon finally act like a little girl. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Carl, waiting for his answer. For now, it does look fine. But there's one thing you really need to consider. Looking at Anon's expectant expression, Carl was not sure whether he should tell her this cruel truth. If there's a problem, just say it. I called you here specifically to confirm this. Anon's expression changed at once. She crossed her arms and glared at Carl, clearly warning him not to keep her in suspense. It's just that, Ms. Anon, you need to be careful. Actually, the entire Abyssal Knights needs to be careful. There's a chance you could end up being used as setup for the next update's story. Carl brought up one of the saddest and most painful fates a gacha character could suffer. Setup? What do you mean? Anon tilted her head slightly and immediately pressed him for an explanation. I mean exactly that. Oath isn't a charity. They didn't write such a great story for you in the Abyssal Knights because they were moved by your knightly spirit or because they suddenly wanted to fight the Calamity Plague. Carl laid the harsh reality bare before Anon. They wrote it to make you sell. The whole point of giving you an epic, tragic story is to make players emotionally invested enough to spend money on the main character of that story. I know that much. Anon was aware of how poorly Hasumi had been treated, but she still said confidently. The Abyssal Knights arc is a major update. Just like the current Saintess arc, it should last for several versions. My adjutant and many other outstanding members could also be added to future banners, so I don't think it will come to that. What about after the major update ends? Losing your value isn't the scariest part. The scariest part is this. Carl pointed to a section of the script in his hand. This section described how the Holy Nation was forced into retreat by the Calamity Plague, how the Saintess was powerless to stop it, and how Anon finally stepped forward to save everything. In that part of the story, the Saintess was being used to elevate Anon. You can't guarantee that the writers won't do the same thing to you later. They might take all the sacrifices and achievements of the Abyssal Knights and reduce them to nothing, just to make the next banner character or faction look stronger. Everything you fought for could be dismissed as something the new character can solve with a casual wave of their hand. Carl's warning made Anon's eyelids twitch, and a chill ran down her spine. That can't happen, right? We're one of the 7 swords of the Holy Nation, 7 of the strongest warriors in the entire country. The things we achieved through countless sacrifices couldn't possibly be handled so easily by someone else. Anon still did not want to believe that Oath's developers would do something that outrageous. It's hard to say, Ms. Anon. Really, You shouldn't try to understand the dev team's decisions from the perspective of saving the world. You need to look at it from the perspective of selling a product. Once your limited banner ends, it won't matter how much you contributed to the world. In terms of sales value, you won't be worth as much as the next new limited character. Carl then gave an example from his previous world. I've seen stories like that before. There was once a banner character who went through 100 reincarnations, killed countless close friends, comrades, and even their own savior with their own hands. They burned everything they had just to seize one tiny possibility, one faint hope. Then the next banner character came out and told the players that all the previous characters' sacrifices, struggles, and efforts were meaningless, because she could save everything with the power of love. After hearing that example, Anon trembled with rage. What do you mean, save everything with the power of love? How does that make any sense? When it comes to selling characters, they really are capable of doing things like that. Carl nodded with complete certainty. That sounds like a nightmare. Anon took a deep breath, took back the script Carl had given her, and said, "Anyway, I still have some time to think about whether I should enter the banner. The situation you described is too extreme. I'll keep watching how things develop for now." Carl did not try to force Anon to join his side immediately, so he simply nodded and said, "Yeah, Ms. Anon, just remember that you always have another option. If you run into any trouble, come find me. I'll take care of it." Anon fell silent for a moment. Since Carl had said that much, she decided to give him something in return. "Then I'll give you some information as well. There are quite a few spies in your Netherworld village right now," Anon said. "That, I already noticed. Ever since the Underworld ban was issued, it feels like every player turned into an informant." Carl knew there were some bad actors mixed into Netherworld village. They were there specifically to investigate other players' main accounts in Oath and report them. No, among these spies, there is one very special person. Anon paused for a moment before continuing. "The Saintess. She's pretending to be a player and has blended in among you. Perhaps the arrival of the Empire's forces has put too much pressure on her." Anon handed Carl a unique player ID. "This is the ID the Saintess is using as her disguise. I'm not sure what she's planning, but you should keep an eye on her movements." Carl glanced at the ID, then focused his attention on the new player using that name. I'm guessing she probably wants to become Glory City's first Pokemon champion." When Carl turned his attention to the Saintess, he found her very seriously choosing her starter Pokemon in Netherworld Village. Chapter 81, Betrayal. As for why the Saintess would disguise herself as a player and sneak into Netherworld Village, Carl felt it was worth following Anon into Glory City's City Hall to investigate. As it happened, the Saintess's true body was currently inside Glory City's City Hall, facing a group of uninvited guests. The visitors had come from the Empire. Their leader was the Empire's new premier damage dealer, scheduled to debut on the next version's limited banner. Her name was Magard, commander of the Imperial Hunter Knights. Although Magard's strength was still far below Anon's, she was strong enough to steadily suppress Griff, the Holy Nation's young Annihilation Unit character. Her combat rating had reached an astonishing 30,000. Not only that, every member of the Hunter Knights was an elite among the Empire's younger generation, with combat power roughly equal to Hasumi's initial form. The entire Hunter Knights had now arrived in Glory City for one purpose: to compete for the spotlight in the next version's main storyline. The Holy Nation has the world-renowned Abyssal Knights supporting it, yet you still allowed a group of backwater troublemakers to humiliate you during the Trial of Glory. The commander of the Hunter Knights, Magard, was a sharp-eyed woman with black hair. With her military uniform, upright posture, and stern temperament, Carl felt certain she would appeal directly to a very specific group of players with very specific tastes. Magard lightly tapped the riding crop in her hand, pointing it toward the Saintess, whose expression had turned extremely unpleasant. "This makes me question whether the Holy Nation's current leader is capable of handling the storyline in later versions. It also makes me wonder whether there are traitors hiding within the Holy Nation. Those people are nothing to fear. There's no need to deal with them at all," the Saintess said, still trying to appear composed. "The Academy head and your Empire are simply overreacting." But only the Saintess herself knew how badly Netherworld Village had drained both the Holy Nation and Oath's official team. Setting aside how much of Oath's revenue Carl had diverted during this period, the Saintess's side had suffered very real losses. The fact that every member of the Navigator Guild had chosen to join Netherworld Village was enough to make the Saintess so furious that she had to scream helplessly into her pillow every night before bed. This was a savior guild where every member was willing to wail for a maxed out 6+5 character. Each one of them had terrifying strength. And now, so many powerful players had changed sides overnight. In the Saintess's view, there was nothing wrong with players wanting to enjoy Netherworld Village. It was not as though they would stop coming back to save the world simply because they spent time there. Let them play. After all, most players liked both games. They would finish their daily missions in Oath, then head over to Netherworld Village for a visit. But Oath's official team simply could not tolerate it, so they introduced a so-called soft ban policy. As a result, all the powerful players the Saintess had worked so hard to win over during this period had switched sides and now stood firmly with Netherworld Village. Even more terrifying was the news that Netherworld Village had introduced something called Anonymous Mode. With Anonymous Mode in place, who knew how many players would be willing to stand with Netherworld Village as time went on? Even if Oath's official team truly issued a purge order, a large number of players would still step forward to defend Netherworld Village. That was not the outcome Oath's official team wanted to see. After all, Netherworld Village was taking revenue straight from their pockets. However, from Carl and Elysium's point of view, Netherworld Village was simply making up for Oath's many gameplay shortcomings. It was giving players the gaming experience they deserved after spending so much money. If anything, Oath's official team should have been giving Carl a generous cut of the profits and thanking him for it. Unfortunately, no matter how much money Oath made, its priority was never game optimization, gameplay improvement, or the player experience. In the eyes of Oath's official team, what Carl was doing was heresy, and heresy had to be eliminated. Even if our game makes more money, how could we possibly take that money and spend it on gameplay improvements and optimization? In any case, the Saintess was currently in a state of extreme rage, hating everyone equally. She hated the shameless way Oath's official team operated. She hated how Carl had managed to convince so many players to abandon their privileged status as saviors in Oath and follow him to the end in a barren place like Netherworld Village. And she hated these people from the Empire for showing up at a time like this to claim the benefits for themselves. So, will you assist us in clearing out Netherworld Village and dealing with its rebels? Although the Saintess was seething with rage inside, she maintained her holy and dignified appearance on the surface. We are not that foolish. Magard, the Empire's new premier damage dealer, revealed a faintly mischievous smile. The saviors, affection means everything to us. Even if those rebels are hiding among the saviors, wiping them out would only make players hate us. We have no intention of taking on such an unpopular role. Of course, as a favor to the Academy head, the Hunter Knights have accepted the mission of defending Glory City and preventing those rebels from setting foot inside. That was the real reason for the Saintess's fury. If the Hunter Knights had accepted the mission to destroy Netherworld Village, the Saintess would probably have laughed herself awake from a dream. It would only be a matter of time before the Empire faction's reputation collapsed among the players and they became the villains everyone wanted to beat up. Then the Holy Nation could have won by doing nothing. Unfortunately, these people were not stupid. They had chosen to defend instead, then watch as the Holy Nation and the Saintess's side were gradually forced into a corner. Carl briefly analyzed the Saintess's current predicament. First, the next major update of Oath, version 2.0, had two possible routes. One was the Empire route. If the story truly followed the Empire route, the Saintess would be finished. Once a batch of new Empire banner characters was released, her character, who was tied to the Holy Nation, would be pushed out of the spotlight, just like Hasumi. The second option was the Holy Nation's Abyssal Knights route. If that route was chosen, the Saintess would likely become one of Oath's most valuable characters, right alongside Irene. Because of her character traits, she functioned as a universal support piece for Holy Nation teams. If more Holy Nation characters were released later, she could even double as a support or abnormal type character. But the route chosen for version 2.0 would be decided by Oath's official team. And now, Oath's official team was using that choice to pressure both the Holy Nation and the Empire. The order given to the Holy Nation was for the Saintess and the Abyssal Knights to hunt down every resident of Netherworld Village. If they found a chance to wipe out Netherworld Village completely, they were to take it without hesitation. How could the Saintess possibly do that? No matter how foolish she was, she could still understand one thing. If the Holy Nation truly destroyed Netherworld Village, the Saviors, the players themselves, might turn around and destroy the Holy Nation in retaliation. But if the Saintess did nothing, Oath's official team would choose the Empire's side. The Empire had certainly promised enough benefits. According to the information the Saintess had gathered, the Empire planned to lead a large number of Calamity-class monsters to Netherworld Village in version 2.0, disguising the attack as a monster siege event and wiping the village out directly, among other plans. Saintess of the Holy Nation, struggle as much as you like during this time. We will take good care of your sister. As Magard spoke, she lightly caressed the cheek of a young girl beside her. The girl's appearance was 70 to 80% similar to the Saintess's. Mira, even you betrayed me. The Saintess could barely keep control of her expression. The person who should have been her exclusive support character, her younger sister and the Holy Nation's second Saintess, Mira, was now standing on the Empire's side. I'm sorry, this happened because you failed to manage Glory City properly, didn't it, sister? I need to preserve a future for the Holy Nation in the versions to come. In Carl's view, the younger sister's reasoning made sense. If version 2.0 truly followed the Empire route and she remained the Saintess's dedicated support character, she would become a dead-end banner for the players. Unless they were die-hard Saintess fans, no player would pull for her. Therefore, Myra's decision was actually the correct one. Chapter 82, The Peak of Wits. Yorokobe, Shonen. Kotomine Kire. ... Fine, you're all betraying me, one after another. Then don't blame me for taking the most extreme option. At this point, the Saintess no longer cared about maintaining her dignity. Faced with such a desperate situation, she decided to use the most drastic method available to save herself. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. Carl, who was eavesdropping nearby, instantly guessed what she was planning after connecting it to the Saintess's earlier decision to infiltrate Netherworld Village. She's going to join Netherworld Village. Anon whispered. No, she won't give up her privileged position in the Holy Nation. But from what I can see, the Saintess does have a way to drag both Oath's official team and the Empire into chaos. Actually, I've had the same option all along, but... Carl lightly scratched his cheek and said, it's a scorched earth tactic. It hurts the enemy, but it hurts you too. I want to give players as many choices as possible, so even if things got desperate, I wouldn't use this method. But judging by the Saintess's current mental state... Sure enough, Carl's prediction was soon confirmed. With a wave of her hand, the Saintess's expression began to twist out of control. You arrogant fools from the Empire. Do you really think only a handful of saviors are exploring Netherworld Village right now? Wrong. Completely wrong. The Saintess made no attempt to hide her intentions and declared it outright. Far more saviors have joined Netherworld Village than you imagine. They're just all using anonymous identities. That's the only reason the Academy Director hasn't punished them yet. So once their true identities are exposed, how many powerful saviors do you think will appear? How many massive whales who have spent absurd amounts of money? How many leaders of top savior guilds, the very people you Imperials have been trying so hard to win over? As the Saintess made her declaration, Magard, the Empire's new top damage dealer who had looked confident until now, finally showed a hint of unease. I will find every last one of them. Doesn't the Academy Director want to ban those traitors? Then I'll expose them all. And when that happens, I want to see. The Saintess turned to look behind her. Displayed on the light screen behind her were the names of the top 100 players in the Trial of Glory. Among these traitors, just how many are champions of the Trial of Glory? How many are the pillar saviors admired by both the Holy Nation and the Empire? And how many of them are the Academy Director's precious whales? If the Academy Director wants to expel and ban them, then by all means, go ahead. There are so many saviors anyway. I'm sure the Academy Director won't mind throwing out his biggest spenders. Brilliant. This was truly the peak of tactical madness. Carl, hiding in the shadows, could not help wanting to applaud the Saintess. Her current mental state was genuinely impressive. To put it simply, she wanted to go nuclear on Oath's official team. You bastards like banning saviors, don't you? I worked so hard to win over a group of top guild leaders, and you stripped them of their savior status just because they played Netherworld Village. Fine, then I'll personally infiltrate Netherworld Village and report even more powerful players and whales until I cut Oath's daily active users and revenue in half. Let's see who panics first. The Saintess's current attitude was simple. Accelerate, keep accelerating, floor it and see what breaks first. Should I knock her out for a while? Even Anon felt intimidated by the Saintess's plan. Actually, I have quite a few players here who want to quit Oath and join Netherworld Village outright just to make their stance clear, Carl said, sounding a little moved. Many players in Netherworld Village had not been banned yet. But in order to show their stance and protest against Oath's official team, they wanted to voluntarily put themselves on the ban list. Or perhaps it should be called the honor roll. But I talked them out of it. There's no need to throw away all their progress in Oath just to make a statement. As for the Saintess's method, it is definitely the most extreme and effective way to force Oath's official team to compromise. But I won't use it, because it isn't necessary. In Carl's view, the Saintess's method was basically a suicide bombing. But Carl was confident he could defeat Oath's official team without going nuclear. So you're just going to let her infiltrate Netherworld Village and report saviors at random? Anon asked. Of course not, but I do plan to let the Saintess experience something in Netherworld Village. Something she has always wanted. Once she gets a taste of it, she'll never be able to go back, Carl said. What is it? Anon asked. The feeling of truly being revered as a divine figure and worshipped by players, maybe. Not just being packaged as a pretty limited character in a display case. With that thought in mind, Carl took action. His figure vanished from in front of Anon as his attention shifted to the other side, Netherworld Village. At that moment, inside Netherworld Village, the Saintess, disguised as a villager player, was hesitantly looking over a large pile of Poké cards in Crimson Knight's open-world instance. Although Carl did not know how the Saintess had obtained a player disguise, he approached her in the role of a guide. It's best to choose the Poké card you like most. The Pokémon DLC systems are still being improved, so it may become harder to obtain Pokémon later, Carl said. The Saintess had been focused on choosing her starter Pokémon, but the moment she heard Carl's voice, she suddenly jumped a long distance back. Miss Player. Carl looked at the Saintess in confusion, pretending nothing had happened. I'm a player now. Cough. After calming herself down, the Saintess looked at Carl and asked, what do you mean it'll become harder to obtain Pokémon later? Exactly what it sounds like. Right now, there are two ways to obtain Pokémon. The first is through base Pokémon. These are powerful Pokémon that can be obtained by participating in the Trial of Glory and spending a large amount of resources. Carl explained the current state of the Pokémon system. The second type is wild Pokémon. However, the wilderness around City of Glory is far too dangerous right now, and these wild Pokémon have no proper habitat. Only after we gain permission to enter City of Glory can we build an ecosystem for them. This was also one of the more frustrating problems Carl had discovered at this stage. Whenever Carl tried to release the Pokémon he had created into the wilderness around City of Glory and let them form an ecosystem, he ran into the same issue. These Pokémon, with an average combat rating of around 100, simply could not compete with the monsters in the wild areas of City of Glory, whose combat ratings often reached several thousand. While a small ecosystem could be built near Netherworld Village, the areas abandoned by Elysium were heavily contaminated by the plague. It would not be long before the Pokémon mutated. Therefore, if Carl truly wanted to build a Pokémon ecosystem where players could capture them freely, he would have to go to the safe zones on the surface. In other words, City of Glory. Forget about Pokémon for now. Do you have any competitions or tournaments? Something where winning would make someone famous quickly. Although the Saintess had come here as a mole to prepare for a large-scale report against Netherworld Village's players, she also understood that she could not report them one by one. She needed to collect enough evidence and then expose them all at once. Only then would it be effective. And to achieve that goal, the Saintess needed to gain a great deal of fame among the players and become someone they admired. Only then would it be easier for her to collect their real oath IDs under various pretexts. Yes. We plan to hold the first City of Glory Pokémon League in a week. The venue will be the gates of City of Glory. Carl's real purpose in holding this league was to help Crimson Knight, the owner of this open-world instance, break through the gates of City of Glory. At this point, City of Glory had already sent more guards to prevent these Netherworld players from slipping inside. 1 or 2 players would not be a problem, but Oath's official developers wanted to prevent a situation where a massive number of villager players, like those in Crimson Knight's world, broke through the gates of City of Glory all at once and advanced without resistance. The guards in charge were the Abyssal Knights and the Empire's newly arrived Hunter Knights. With their current villager-level combat ratings, Crimson Knight and the players from the Navigator Guild were no match for those defensive forces. So Carl came up with a brilliant idea. He would host a Pokemon duel tournament. Then, using a gimmick like giving away 100 max-tier top-up packs to the audience, he would attract the original Oath players into Crimson Knight's world as spectators. After that short Pokemon duel event ended, the visiting Oath players would naturally grow curious about where they could play it themselves. At that point, Carl would use their momentum to push forward and break through the gates of City of Glory's lower district. What are you planning this time? The Saintess keenly sensed that Carl was about to pull another major stunt. I'm not sure what you mean, Miss Player. Carl kept the same smile on his face. Then I'll choose this Pokemon. By the way, how exactly do you play this Pokemon duel? The Saintess hurriedly changed the subject and randomly pulled a Poké card named Riolu from the pile. Carl had prepared many Pokemon options for every player, not just the classic starter trio. However, each player could only choose one. Unfortunately, the open-world Pokemon capture system had not launched yet. Carl would only be able to experiment with that after breaking through City of Glory. At this stage, most players were still capturing Oath's original monsters in the Trial of Glory. Then allow me to give you a beginner's tutorial. Carl took out a card and summoned his own Pokemon, the Pikachu he had first created. Why does mine look like a dog standing on two legs? Whatever. The Saintess realized that the card she had drawn was a fighting-type Pokemon. Lucario was a bipedal, jackal-like Pokemon that carried the aura of a martial artist from head to toe. In any case, she had plenty of sacred contract stones and paid contract stones on hand, so she could power up this Pokemon to its limit in one go. Miss Player, would you like to choose turn-based combat or real-time combat? Turn-based combat is more suitable for beginners who are capturing Pokemon, while real-time combat is much more entertaining to watch. The league will also use real-time battles. Carl provided two combat modes. The first was the core essence of Pokemon-style games, turn-based combat. Although Carl also liked Pokemon's various experiments with combat gameplay over the years, he was still a firm supporter of turn-based battles. As for how Carl implemented turn-based combat in the world of Elysium, that was also thanks to Elysium granting him this gameplay system. In practice, it felt somewhat like time stopped during battle. The other mode, real-time combat, had its own strengths. Real-time, of course, but if it's just these two little creatures fighting each other, is there really anything worth watching? The Saintess guessed Carl's next plan. He probably wanted to use Pokemon duels to attract Oath's original player base. But the Saintess truly could not imagine it. Would the saviors really be interested in watching two small creatures fight? After all, even Oath's various PvP videos, where players used flashy special effects and action modules, did not actually get many views online. Spectacle is something you have to design. Oath's original combat effects are just visual clutter and damage numbers piled on top of each other. There's no real sense of offense, defense, momentum, or tension. Naturally, players don't find it interesting, and spectators have a hard time understanding what makes it fun. Carl said this with a smile that made the Saintess feel extremely uncomfortable. But real-time Pokemon combat is completely different. Want to give it a try? How different can it be? Isn't it just a creature battle? Fine, bring it on. The Saintess fed her Lucario 2 sacred contract stones, raising its combat rating to roughly match Carl's Pikachu, then began the duel. Lucario, attack. The Saintess immediately gave the command to strike first. A pitch-black energy sphere condensed in Lucario's hands, then shot toward Pikachu. Pikachu, use double team to dodge, then close the distance. Carl showed no mercy and immediately began issuing commands. The instant Pikachu moved at high speed across the battlefield, it dodged Lucario's energy sphere and charged straight ahead. Luca, now, start with quick attack, hit it during its recovery frames. Carl's voice cut off the Saintess's command. Recovery frames? What were recovery frames? While the Saintess was still confused, she noticed that after Lucario threw the energy sphere, its movement stiffened for a split second. Pikachu seized that brief opening and slammed into it with a lightning-wrapped headbutt. A one-hit display appeared between Pikachu and Lucario. Lucario was also knocked into the air by Pikachu's attack. Steady yourself and counterattack. The Saintess began to realize something was wrong. Don't give it room to reset. Use Iron Tail to stagger it, then follow up with Brick Break. Carl issued several commands in succession. Pikachu's tail instantly glowed and struck Lucario hard. At the same time, Using the recovery motion of the tail strike, its small claws also lit up and slashed across Lucario's body. 6 hits. Why can't I counter? Isn't this cheating? Wait, it barely lost any HP. Only then did the Saintess realize that despite the entire sequence of attacks, Lucario's HP had not dropped by much. Perfect timing. PP is charged enough. Pikachu. Finish it with Thunderbolt. Carl gave the final command. Pika. Dazzling light erupted from Pikachu's entire body, pouring into Lucario as it floated in midair. 7 hits. 11 hits. Finally, after the combo counter climbed all the way to 15 hits, Lucario fell to the ground. Although the combo looked terrifying, Lucario's HP had only been reduced by half. But the Saintess had assumed that under such a fierce assault, her Pokémon should have been defeated long ago. How was it? That's the essence of real-time combat. Carl paused his offensive for a moment and asked the Saintess. I think I understand what you meant by spectacle. The Saintess realized that this real-time combat was not as close to realistic combat as she had imagined. It was not simply about finding an opening and striking the enemy's vital points. Of course, testing the opponent, creating openings, and landing decisive hits still mattered, but after landing a hit, a player could also extend it into a beautiful combo. There are many more layers to it. Spacing, intercepts, counter hits, combos. There are plenty of technical terms, but I won't go into all of them right now. In short, Miss Player, if you're interested, I can teach you everything. The real-time combat mode Carl had designed for Pokémon was perhaps one of the most spectator-friendly game genres of all. A fighting game, and the existence of Pokémon dramatically lowered the barrier to entry for fighting games. Because Pokémon trainers could genuinely say to their Pokémon, "Quick, show me a dream combo." And if the Pokémon was properly trained, it really could execute a flashy and satisfying combo under its trainer's command. This made Pokémon battles extremely pleasing to watch. Even players who had never touched the game could get excited just by watching and shout. Now that is a battle worth watching. Indeed, this is far more interesting than the deathmatches in the arena. I never expected the day would come when I'd need to ask you for help. The Saintess realized that winning the upcoming Pokémon League at the gates of City of Glory was her best chance to earn the players' admiration. Come on, then, the champion of the first City of Glory Pokémon League will be me. She had to win this championship. Right now, it was her only way to survive as a banner character until version 2.0. Chapter 83, Saintess's Hard Work. Because by this stage, half of Netherworld Village's players had run off to the City of Glory to haul supplies. Carl no longer needed to spend large amounts of premium contract stones buying supplies for Netherworld Villages, loot, fight, extract, gameplay loop. The supply economy for Netherworld Village's extraction runs had also settled into a strange but stable cycle. A bunch of casual players who just wanted to unwind would happily buy piles of items before heading into the dungeon. Then they would get killed halfway through the run, dropping everything they had brought with them while everyone else laughed and cheered. So now, Carl was using the huge number of premium contract stones he had earned from Oath's official team to create Pokémon. The biggest difference between premium contract stones and sacred contract stones was their upper limit. Sacred contract stones could be consumed to strengthen oneself indefinitely, as long as a character's body could withstand the growth. But if premium contract stones were used to create living beings, then a combat rating of around 1000 was basically that creature's limit. Right now, Carl was mass-producing a large batch of Pokémon with an average combat rating of around 100. Then he temporarily placed them into a dormant state and sealed them inside Poké Cards. During this period, in order to let more main game Oath players experience the thrill of Pokémon battles during the upcoming Pokémon League, Carl once again went to ask Doraemon, his all-purpose miracle worker, for help. You want my Abyssal Knights to split off a portion of their consciousness and act as rental Pokémon, giving temporary tournament players the illusion that they're incredibly strong. Anon did not actually mind lending her knights to Carl. After all, more than a dozen players in Netherworld Village had already successfully formed contracts with the Abyssal Knights. Even as avatars, they were still powerful enough. This time, Carl's request was for the members under Anon's command to split off a small part of their main consciousness and play the role of native Pokémon. These native Pokémon, of course, would not permanently belong to the players. They were rentals, meant to let Oath players who came to watch and wanted to participate get a taste of the action. You really are devious, aren't you? You're using rentals to let the saviors experience the thrill of commanding something powerful, only to take that feeling away afterward. Anon immediately realized that Carl was also making full use of the temporary rental clause in their agreement. I'm not taking it away. I'm awakening their desire to raise one themselves. A lot of games do this. They let players experience the protagonist at full power in the beginning, then take it away and make them slowly unlock that strength again, Carl said. And I'll do my best to distinguish between the rental users and the officially registered players. Fine, my knights seem to be enjoying their interactions with your players anyway. Anon had no reason to refuse. Every member of the Abyssal Knights was a monster-level existence. Splitting their main consciousness into tens of thousands of avatars was nothing difficult for them. Thanks. So Carl quickly created a large batch of rental Pokémon based on the split consciousnesses of the Abyssal Knights, preparing them for Oath's main game players to try out. After that, Carl still had to spare some attention to give the Saintess special guidance. What surprised Carl was that the Saintess was poorer than he had expected. This poverty was not part of her disguise. Rather, it seemed that most of the premium contract stones and sacred contract stones she earned as a banner character had to be handed over to the Holy Nation. That was even worse than Hasumi's situation. At least Hasumi could freely use the contract stones she earned. This was probably why the Saintess had spared no effort in winning over the saviors, constantly trying to climb higher and gain real authority within the Holy Nation. After all, Saintess was ultimately just an empty title. She had almost no military power of her own. Carl watched as the Saintess practiced combos and spacing techniques with her Pokémon day and night, working tirelessly without complaint. Could she genuinely be holding a grudge? Was she planning to gain enough player support in the future, return to the Holy Nation's capital, and declare, "The saviors stand with me. The old order ends today. All of you can step down. Miss Player, your improvement is faster than I expected. Perhaps I should teach you a few ways to build your reputation quickly in the first Pokémon League." Carl looked at the Saintess sitting on the ground, her voice already hoarse. Beside her, her Pokémon lay sprawled out, panting heavily, its fur a complete mess. After a full day of training, both the Saintess and her Pokémon were completely exhausted. Most new players could simply play the turn-based mode and enjoy the purest Pokémon battle experience. The real-time Pokémon battles Carl had designed could also have a very low barrier to entry. A player only needed to shout, "Dodge," at their Pokémon, and that was enough. But if someone wanted to reach the top and become one of the strongest, the amount of practice required would rise to a terrifying level. As a trainer, a Pokémon trainer was not just someone who stood on the sidelines shouting commands. The first thing the Saintess had to do was observe the opposing Pokémon's movements and attack trajectory. Then, at the very first possible moment, she had to give her own Pokémon the optimal response. Which move to use, what angle to attack from, and sometimes even the exact angle of a punch. Words alone could not convey those details well, so the Saintess would occasionally perform the attack motions herself from the sidelines to help her Pokémon understand the angle she wanted. In short, to dominate real-time combat, both the Pokémon trainer and the Pokémon needed an enormous amount of practice. Is that so? Speaking of which, can you still keep going, Luca? The Saintess sat up and handed a berry to the Pokémon beside her. The Saintess had already learned her Pokémon's true name, Lucario, from the Pokécard's information, so she simply called her Luca. And the Saintess's attitude toward her Pokémon was not really that of a master toward a pet. It was closer to colleagues working together. After all, in the Saintess's view, her future would be spent constantly climbing the ranks within the Holy Nation. Winning this Pokémon League championship was only a means to that end. She also did not plan to invest too much emotion into these Pokémon, since she had no intention of walking the path of a Pokémon trainer to the very end. Grew. The Saintess's Lucario remained highly motivated. Carl observed that this Lucario probably had a hardy nature. To put it simply, winning the league championship is important, but there's another key point. You need to win beautifully. First, some skills have perfect guard mechanics, such as quick guard. If you practice them well, you can absolutely create moments that players will record and replay for years. Carl paused before continuing. Second, the real-time combo system allows Pokémon to perform dazzling, spectacular combo sequences. As he spoke, Carl pointed at Lucario, who had recovered some stamina and stood up again. Your Pokémon has a signature move called Aura Sphere. Normally, it's a move that deals instant damage. But what if you poured more power into it and made it linger in midair for a while? The moment Carl gave this example, the Saintess's eyes lit up. The Saintess herself was a powerful spellcaster, so of course she understood what Carl meant. She immediately gave Lucario a command. Luca, first, pour enough power into Aura Sphere. Imagine it becoming heavy. Don't rush. Follow my guidance. The advantage of having a Pokemon trainer who actually understood magic became clear at once. When the Saintess's Lucario began condensing a special Aura Sphere under her guidance, the Saintess could also step in and subtly use her own magic to help Lucario grasp the feeling. Finally, Lucario truly unleashed a move that would make people wonder, is that even legal? A huge Aura Sphere drifted forward at a slow, steady speed. The training post it touched was instantly blasted backward by its immense destructive force. Don't just stand there in shock. Miss Player, have your Lucario try to knock the enemy back into the Aura Sphere's range. Carl had not expected his idea to actually succeed. But creating a slow-moving Aura Sphere was only the beginning. Knock it back, Luca, do it, the Saintess immediately gave the command. But Lucario's movement was still a step too slow. In that brief moment of hesitation, the post had already fallen to the ground, meaning the combo could not be continued. Don't be discouraged, let's try again. The Saintess realized that the move Carl was teaching her might not offer any real damage advantage, even if she mastered it. But it was cool. If this combo succeeded, it would be a dream sequence powerful enough to make the entire stadium erupt. As long as it looked cool, that was enough. During this period, the Saintess had come to understand something. As a banner character, and as a future champion, her duty was to make the spectators cheer. A spectacular performance was also an essential part of Pokemon battles. Chapter 84, Instant Strikes. Break the birdcage, and be free. Yi sang. In this way, the extremely rough first Pokemon League steadily took shape under the active preparations of the Navigator Guild. The participating Pokemon were limited to the native Pokemon created by Carl. As for the players busy capturing Pokemon in Oath's main game, they were too focused on grinding their Trial of Glory rankings to pay attention to this minor competition. Each player was limited to 2 participating Pokemon. This rule was meant to prevent type advantages from turning a match into something completely unwinnable. Finally, after several days of preparation, the members of the Navigator Guild set up a massive projection screen at the gates of the City of Glory. At the same time, they used Netherworld Village's construction system to clear out an entire forest near the city gates, transforming it into a battle plaza capable of holding thousands of people. At that moment, by the gates of the City of Glory inside Crimson Knight's open-world instance, the Empire's Hunter Knights had concealed their true identities and taken up guard duty. Their goal was to prevent a large number of Netherworld Village residents from entering the City of Glory. Oath's official team could tolerate a few Netherworld players causing trouble in the Trial of Glory. But if those players flooded into the City of Glory in the main world, then Oath's current largest main city would be no different from a conquered zone. Marked ones, stay away from the Holy City. The Empire's Hunter Knights showed no mercy. The moment the residents of Netherworld Village approached, the entire unit stood at the city gates with heavy shields and spears raised. And this was only the first step. Anything connected to Netherworld Village would be treated as hostile the moment it entered the City of Glory. If caught, they would be killed without exception. But while these anonymous soldiers could openly act against the villagers of Netherworld Village, would they dare to act against Oath's saviors? Carl's promotion for this Pokemon League was simple. He had 2 influential streamers, Crimson Knight and Macchiato, stream their participation directly. Advancing through one round of the qualifiers earned 160 contract stones. Carl was handing out premium contract stones, and since his resources were limited, this was the only method he could use for now. Most players might not even dream of becoming the Trial of Glory champion. But advancing one round in such an obscure little competition, how was that any different from a free reward? Thus, the equivalent of a free gacha pull was enough to attract a large number of bored Oath main game players into Crimson Knight's open-world instance to see what was going on. Everyone, the qualifiers have begun. You can rent Pokemon here for free battles. This qualifier uses a dynamic point system, so there's no need to worry about missing the registration window. The rental Pokemon Carl had been busy constructing, played by the split consciousnesses of the Abyssal Knights, finally came in handy. However, the combat rating of every rental Pokemon in the first Pokemon League was locked at around 500. As for trainers who had trained their own Pokemon by hand, their Pokemon's combat ratings would not be adjusted. This was one of Carl's balancing measures. Furthermore, Carl would do his best to separate official participants from players who were merely trying the mode for fun within the matchmaking system. However, the Pokemon's skills were fully unlocked. This was meant to give Oath's main game players, as well as village players who had never tried Pokemon battles before, a more complete taste of the fun of battling. Or perhaps the fun of being carried to victory. Is this some kind of new event? Virtual pet battles. Did Oath release a new pet system? There are over 100 types. This is way too hard to choose. Does anyone know which Pokemon are top tier? Just pick the coolest one. I think this Charizard looks pretty good. Carl's strategy of handing out contract stones seemed to make Oath's main game players mistake this for a new official Oath event. Moreover, they had not publicly joined Netherworld Village. They had only entered Crimson Knight's open-world instance to pick up temporary Pokemon Poké cards. And so, the first Pokemon League, crude and somewhat playful as it was, officially began. As for the overall atmosphere, Carl felt that rather than a serious tournament, it was more like a fan gathering. At first, Oath players treated Pokemon battles like most of Oath's minigame events. They assumed there would not be much gameplay. They would play casually, grab a wave of contract stones, then never touch this trashy minigame again for the rest of their lives. But soon, the Oath players realized that something was not quite right. The reason was simple: the rental Pokemon Carl provided were far too powerful. Do I need to give orders to these Pokemon? How do I do that? Like, Charizard, attack. A player who only played Oath had chosen Charizard as his temporary tournament Pokemon. Unsurprisingly, he fell into confusion during his first match. As a result, he simply gave Charizard the vague command to attack. Then it happened. Charizard seized the opening and struck the enemy Pokemon with a sharp tail attack. After staggering the opponent, Charizard let out a roar, then raised both hands toward the sky. It was as if it were telling its temporary trainer exactly how much health the opponent was about to lose. The next second, Charizard grabbed the opponent. The wings on its back beat violently as it soared high into the sky, then dove down at extreme speed, slamming the opponent heavily into the ground and sending massive cracks across the earth. Was that really a move it used because of my command? That Oath player was stunned by the sheer beauty of violence displayed by Charizard under his command. And this was only the beginning. In Carl's eyes, although this Pokemon League was supposed to be a beginner-friendly competition for novice Pokemon trainers, the situation was completely different for the Pokemon themselves. After all, the core consciousnesses inside the rental Pokemon were battle-hardened Abyssal Knights. To put it bluntly, this was an internal training session for one of Elysium's strongest factions. They showed no mercy to their colleagues, and the resulting spectacle was enough to thrill both Oath players and Village players alike. Super combos and ultimate moves appeared one after another. For example, a Ceruledge pulled its opponent into a dark domain, summoned countless clones, and under its trainer's wide-eyed gaze, cut the enemy down with a storm of instant slashes. Incineroar unleashed heavy punches wrapped in flames at such terrifying speed that even its own trainer could not clearly see them. All kinds of exaggerated moves were used by these rental Pokemon. And all of them were triggered by the short, clumsy commands of novice trainers, such as, attack it, dodge, and, use that move. The brilliant performances of these rental Pokemon caused the confidence of the Oath main game players, who had originally only come to grab 160 contract stones and leave, to swell uncontrollably. In the hearts of every player participating in the qualifiers, thoughts like, am I actually this strong? Could I be a genius? And, this year's Pokemon Trainer Championship is definitely mine, began surfacing one after another, making them impossibly excited. But the Abyssal Knights also respected participants who had personally trained their own Pokemon. Whenever they encountered an opponent who was not another Abyssal Knight, they would always switch to normal AI mode. In other words, they would fight according to their temporary trainer's actual skill level, without letting the trainer notice anything. However, the Oath main game players who had come to compete had already been completely dazzled by the magnificent performances of the rental Pokemon. Although they later lost one after another to genuinely skilled trainers, they still chose to stay and watch the remaining matches of the Pokemon League. After all, they wanted to experience that thrilling feeling again, the feeling of commanding their own Pokemon to unleash a flashy, ridiculous move like a storm of instant slashes. In this way, 2 days later, the final battle of the first Pokémon League finally began under the watchful eyes of countless players, with the Pokémon theme blaring in the background. Unsurprisingly, the Saintess and her Lucario had fought their way to the very end. Her final opponent was Crimson Knight, the leader of the Navigator Guild, along with Crimson Knight's Pokémon, Gardevoir. Fighting versus Psychic, it was an unfavorable matchup. Fortunately, Lucario's Steel-type skills could also counter Gardevoir's Fairy typing. And after fighting all the way to this point, trust mattered far more than type advantage. I thought this was just a small player-run event. I didn't expect so many people to show up for the finals. The Saintess stepped onto the stage for the final showdown. By now, the surrounding players had packed the entire stage area shoulder to shoulder. And when the Saintess appeared, the cheers were so loud they could be heard even from the upper district of the City of Glory. Guess how many spectators will rush into the City of Glory to capture these Pokémon after the finals end? Crimson Knight could feel that the atmosphere had already reached its peak. All they needed now was one brilliant duel. One brilliant duel, and the City of Glory inside her open-world instance would be breached. Chapter 85, The Execution. Taking into account the stamina of both the Pokémon and the trainers, the championship final adopted a best-of-5 format. Although this was only a small competition that Carl and the Navigator Guild had put together in a few days, Carl did not cut corners on things like spectator stands or projected livestream screens that allowed people to watch the match from every angle. The Navigator Guild could handle the viewing platform themselves. Carl left that part to the players. As for facilities like the projected livestream screens, which required Elysium's assistance, he borrowed Elysium's permissions to set them up. Finally, with Macchiato's somewhat amateur but passionate commentary added in, the championship battle actually looked quite respectable. But once the finals began, Carl's attention, and even the Saintess's, was forced back to the main world. The reason was simple. Oath's official team had suddenly chosen this exact moment to announce the final story direction for version 2.0. Because Mio was also watching the match this time, Carl managed to sneak into the version 2.0 discussion meeting through his connection with Anon. After consultations between us and the four major parties, the Holy Nation, the Empire, and the Free Alliance, it has been decided that Oath version 2.0's main storyline will center on the Abyssal Knights. The Academy director did not waste time with pleasantries. He announced Oath's version 2.0 plan right from the start. But from that one sentence, Carl still picked up on something important. The relationship between the three major powers, the Holy Nation, the Empire, and the Free Alliance, and Oath's official team was not one of master and servant. It was closer to a partnership. It was just that Oath's official team currently controlled all Savior-related resources. Because of that, no matter what conditions they proposed, the three great nations had no choice but to grit their teeth and cooperate. Today was one such example. The originally planned Empire-focused version 2.0 had been temporarily changed into a version centered on the Abyssal Knights. Of course, this did not mean all the content Oath had prepared for the Empire route would be scrapped. Things like new maps and new gameplay mechanics only needed minor adjustments to fit the Abyssal Knights theme. So at that moment, Carl was most concerned about the Empire's attitude. His gaze turned toward Magard, commander of the Hunter Knights. What made Carl realize something was wrong was the fact that Commander Magard showed no dissatisfaction at all. That meant Oath's official team had offered the Empire enough benefits to make them accept the fact that version 2.0's main resources would be given to the Holy Nation. In exchange, although the identities and appearances of the City of Glory's NPCs will remain unchanged, the people behind them will be entirely replaced by Imperial personnel, the Academy director said, informing everyone of one of the benefits the Empire had received. Our Empire will dispatch its finest soldiers to replace those weak refugees of yours. While satisfying the Saviors' various preferences and interests, they will also accurately identify which Saviors are traitors. Magard, commander of the Hunter Knights, directly added the reason Oath's official team wanted to replace all the NPCs in the City of Glory. Currently, the NPCs in the City of Glory were all being played by patients from the Holy Nation. They had come here to seek treatment, so they endlessly tolerated and endured the players' various behaviors. This included cases where they encountered villager players. Those NPCs would simply turn a blind eye and smile as the villager players ransacked their homes. But once they were replaced by Imperial soldiers, the situation would be completely different. The smallest problem was that the NPCs' combat power would rise significantly. The bigger problem was that these Imperial soldiers would strictly follow every rule issued by Oath's official team. They would prohibit all contact and communication with villager players, refusing to acknowledge them at all. Then, using the appearances and identities of the City of Glory NPCs who had finally built some rapport with the players, they could slander the villager players, and might even secretly attack them. Isn't that the same as handing the City of Glory over to the Empire? The Saintess immediately stood up and objected. The Holy Nation has already agreed to this decision. Compared to the City of Glory, the situation at the Abyssal Frontier, or more bluntly, the Abyssal Knights, requires the Saviors' support far more urgently. The Academy Director then turned his gaze toward Anon, who had remained silent the entire time. Carl really had not expected Oath's official team to be so good at playing every side. To put it plainly, this version 2.0 decision handed the City of Glory over to the Empire. It was likely that the NPCs for many new maps and towns in future updates would also be handled by the Empire. What the Holy Nation gained in return was the chance for the Abyssal Knights to receive a large influx of savior reinforcements, easing the crisis of disasters and plagues at the border. It was a three-way deal where everyone seemed to benefit. The Empire gained plenty of opportunities to interact with players and build goodwill, allowing them to produce large quantities of antidotes. The Holy Nation gained the players' combat power. And Oath's official team gained Anon, and possibly the entire Abyssal Knights, as an overwhelmingly powerful main banner character lineup that could dominate all of version 2.0. So everyone won, but who lost? The answer was the Saintess. And Saintess Lilista, after our discussions with the Holy Nation, the final decision has been made. Starting today, you will be dismissed and stripped of your status and position as Saintess. The Academy Director announced the final judgment against the Saintess in front of everyone. This was also within Carl's expectations. The main problem was that the Saintess was too straightforward. Her plan to infiltrate Netherworld Village and report players to force the entire situation to explode could indeed help her achieve her goal. But that was the kind of plan she should have kept to herself and executed in secret. She absolutely should not have announced it in public during a moment of emotional agitation. It was like a celebrity telling her own agency, "I'm taking my fans with me, and we're burning this whole company down." No matter how generous Oath's official team was, there was no way they could tolerate the Saintess doing something like that. Besides, based on Carl's interactions with them, Oath's official team was extremely petty. That made them even less likely to forgive the Saintess's actions. Dismiss me and strip me of my Saintess status. No, you can't do this. I'm a limited character supported by millions of saviors. Have you forgotten that? The Saintess could hardly believe that Oath's official team had actually decided to remove her. The reason she had dared to use the reporting tactic to pressure the officials was because she was the absolute main featured character of the 1x versions. At least at this stage, she was the face of Oath. When players mentioned Oath, she was the most popular character they thought of first. I don't know how many saviors have spent huge amounts of money and contract stones on me. How can you strip me of my status as the Saintess? You have no right to dismiss me. The emotional side of the Saintess's personality was on full display at that moment. Carl really wanted to rush forward and tell her to calm down, but he knew that even if he did, it would be useless. It might even make the situation worse. Originally, if this scene had been recorded and uploaded online, it could have triggered a massive PR disaster, one no weaker than certain infamous game community controversies. Unfortunately, Carl discovered that from the moment they entered the council chamber, all recording functions had been blocked. Elysium had personally blocked them. Even at this point, you're still trying to keep both sides balanced. You little troublemaker. However, Elysium usually did everything it could to help Carl. One could only say that as the first game to enter this territory, Oath's speed of making money and expanding its popularity was simply too fast. And to say something rather funny, Carl even felt that if this scene really had been recorded and posted online, there would probably still be a large number of extremely loyal Oath defenders rushing to explain it away. They would say things like, "This was maliciously recorded, it's obviously fake, you don't even understand the plot and you're already attacking it," and so on. Regardless, the Saintess's punishment continued. You wouldn't risk provoking the wrath of so many saviors just to delete me, right? The Saintess still clung to a sliver of hope, imagining she could use player outrage as leverage against the developers. Unfortunately, the Saintess had still not realized her true position as a product. Her life had been written and arranged by the game writers long ago. Her appearance had been sculpted by the game modelers. Her power had likewise been granted by the game's balance designers. An arranged life, a fabricated identity and appearance, borrowed power. Everything that made up the character known as the Saintess did not truly belong to her. A noble Saintess, that was all an illusion. She was only a mass-produced product. And as a product, there were naturally countless backup replacements. Delete you. No, this is a replacement. You are the second defective product we created. The first one does not need to be replaced for now, since the damage is limited. But your behavior has already threatened the foundation of Oath. The Academy director's tone was cold and absolute. So from today onward, your younger sister, the second Saintess Mira, will inherit your identity, your name, and your position as a banner character. She will meet the players as the first Saintess, Lilista. It works perfectly. Version 2.0 can release a limited support form for you. As for you, from today onward, you are officially dismissed by both the Holy Nation and Oath. Actually, dismissed may be too gentle a word. Saintess Lilista, from today onward, you are officially discarded. There is no longer a place for you in the world of Oath. Hand over your combat rating and character core. The character core was the card that symbolized extraordinary power, the same kind of card Elysium had originally bestowed upon Carl and the banner characters. Carl's character core was Paradise Illusion. This object was not only the source of a banner character's extraordinary power. It was also the only standard by which a banner character maintained their emotional connection with the players. In a sense, it was the very existence of the banner character itself. To put it simply, all the fan counts the Saintess had accumulated in Oath, including meta players, true love players, fanatics, and more, were tied to that core. The emotional connections of all the players who deeply loved the Saintess were stored within her character core. Once the Saintess handed over her character core, she would truly no longer be Oath 1's main featured character. She would no longer be the 5-star limited Magister, noble Saintess Lilista. No, I won't give it to you. This is the only thing that belongs to me. The saviors, love and support are mine. I earned them through my own hard work. Naturally, the Saintess was unwilling to hand it over. After all, that thing likely represented the very meaning of her existence. Just as the card stated, meta players, 4.01 million. True love players, 5.01 million. Fanatics, 1,760. This was everything the Saintess had. The only real thing she possessed. The love of the players. Although it is a little regrettable to kill a character created by our own company, Magard, Anon, you may proceed. Strip her of her character core, the Academy director ordered coldly. Anon stood in place, unmoved. Even Magard, commander of the Hunter Knights, showed an extremely complicated expression when she saw this. It was difficult not to see her own possible future in the Saintess's fate. But this was also a necessary method for Oath's official team to establish authority over these banner characters, the products they had created. Finally, Magard drew her sword and slowly walked toward the Saintess. If you must blame someone, blame yourself for turning against your own creators. Just as Magard was about to take down the Saintess, Carl appeared directly in front of her. He stood between Magard and the Saintess. If I stayed hidden now, even I'd have trouble respecting myself. Carl's gaze swept over everyone present. Chapter 86, Champion Saintess Lilista. Carl Agata. The moment the Academy director saw Carl in person, he gritted his teeth and spat out his name. It's been a while, boss. Thanks to the steady revenue stream from Oath, I've had plenty of funds to keep expanding the village. Carl knew exactly how to provoke the Academy director, or more precisely, the most shameless members of Oath's board. Netherworld Village was now gradually eating into Oath's revenue. Every time Oath made money, a portion of it had to be shared with Carl. And as Netherworld Village continued to grow, the amount Carl took from their pockets would only increase. Not only that, but Elysium, possibly to put even more pressure on Oath's official team, had also started transferring shares of Oath's parent company to Carl. To put it bluntly, Elysium had created a dueling arena. As long as Carl continued gaining player support, it was entirely possible for him to annex Oath and the entire company behind it. That was why Oath's official team was trying to suppress Netherworld Village, or even destroy it outright, despite the risk of banning players' accounts. For Carl, there was no need to kill his enemy in one blow. Sometimes, it was far more effective to slowly torment them, stripping away everything they valued most piece by piece. What are you waiting for? His character core is the highest priority target. The Academy Director ordered. Carl could understand why the Academy Director was so impatient. According to Carl's investigation, many members of Oath's board had taken the money earned from Oath and invested it into all kinds of bizarre projects. These people had started out making games, yet looked down on the gaming industry. It was a common and rather amusing phenomenon. Unfortunately for them, the projects they thought would make them rich were all bottomless money pits. Once their cash flow broke, they could easily drag the entire company into bankruptcy. The money earned from Oath should have been enough for them to squander freely. Unfortunately, Carl's appearance had made them realize they were under threat. Go on, keep getting complacent. Keep exploiting and wasting the players' trust. I'm also curious to see how long Oath's first mover advantage can protect you. As Carl said this, Megard had already drawn her sword and charged. But the person who drew their sword to block her path was actually someone Carl had not seen in a long time. The ever-reliable Griff. I thought it would be, well, this works too. Carl had expected Anon to intervene, but since it was inconvenient for her to act right now, she had probably let Griff take the blame instead. At that moment, Carl turned back to the Saintess and shouted directly. What are you standing there for? Run, run, but where can I even go? The Saintess looked around in confusion. If she ran away, she would have no place left in the main world. The Holy Nation, the Empire, and Oath's official team were all hunting her down. She had also lost all of Oath's promotional support. As a banner character, she was practically dead. Don't you still have another battlefield? Stop clinging to your life as a product here. Go to that other battlefield and earn the players' respect. Real respect. Make the players truly willing to follow you and adore you, Saintess Lilista. No. Carl paused, then spoke the title the Saintess truly longed for. Champion Lilista, go. Win the match, then stand beneath the players' cheers and let them be yours for real. Quote. In that instant, the Saintess suddenly remembered. She still had a match to finish. Yes, she still had a real honor waiting for her to fight for. Her identity as the Saintess might have been fake, but her identity as a champion would be real. So the Saintess made a decision that banner characters rarely made. She completely transferred her main consciousness from the main world into the player's open world instance. The Saintess's figure vanished from the main world. Instead, she focused all her attention on the final Pokémon duel against Crimson Knight. At that moment, the first Pokémon League had already reached its conclusion. It was a best-of-5 match, and both sides had won 2 rounds each. This was the final match point. The round that would decide the champion. The Saintess focused her attention on the final Pokémon battle. However, even though she was a digital lifeform capable of splitting her main consciousness into tens of thousands of parts, the emotional shock from what had happened in the main world still affected her decision-making. Because of a command mistake, Lucario was caught off guard by Gardevoir and struck by a high-damage combo. When Lucario fell from midair and hit the ground, its HP was almost completely depleted. Wait, when did I get pushed this far in a Pokémon duel? The Saintess was dazed. She had not even realized how she had suddenly ended up on the verge of losing the final match. To be honest, she had not cared that much about the Pokémon League final at first. Even if she failed to win the championship, it would not have been a big deal. After all, she could still go back to being a banner character loved by countless saviors, then use other methods to deceive the residents of Netherworld Village. Yes, in the past, she had always had a way out. At worst, she could just go back to being the Saintess. But now, the Saintess realized she had no way out left. Her identity as the Saintess had been stripped away. If she lost here too, she would face a fate even more miserable than Hasumi's. She would be forgotten by the saviors and reduced to an obscure, discarded character. She could still survive, perhaps, but the dream she had worked so hard for would vanish in an instant. It's over. When the Saintess realized this, her emotions finally collapsed. She knelt on the ground and began crying uncontrollably. My identity as the Saintess is gone. My dream of rising through the Holy Nation has vanished. I couldn't play the game well. I couldn't live my life well. And now I'm going to lose this match too, just because I got distracted. My life, my dream, my future, haven't they all been ruined? Just as the Saintess spoke those despairing words, Crimson Knight showed no mercy and directly ordered her Gardevoir to deliver the finishing blow. Gardevoir, use Psyshock. It's over. The moment the Saintess saw Gardevoir fire a devastating beam toward Lucario, Macchiato, who was acting as the commentator, also shouted. This has to be the final blow. Lucario has less than 2% HP remaining. Even if it blocks this Psyshock, the piercing damage should still finish it off. It looks like the champion of the first Pokémon League will be Crimson Knight, leader of the Navigator Guild. The Saintess closed her eyes in despair. But then, the sudden cheers of the surrounding crowd made her flinch. Those cheers were not celebrating the birth of a champion. They were louder, sharper, and filled with disbelief. They were the cheers an audience gave when they saw a glimmer of hope appear at the very edge of defeat. Wah! Wah! What? Lucario blocked it. The Saintess's Lucario didn't lose any HP. Macchiato's shocked voice made the Saintess open her eyes. Only then did she see it. Her scar-covered Lucario stood firm, pale blue aura burning around its body, enduring the first impact of Psyshock. Luca. During that moment, Lucario glanced back at its trainer. It was as if it were saying, I held on because I didn't want to see you cry. Luca, it's not over yet, there's still hope. At that moment, the Saintess understood what her Pokémon was trying to tell her. This is Quick Guard. The Saintess naturally remembered the key ability Carl had taught her. Certain skills had a perfect guard mechanic. As long as the attack was blocked at the critical moment, no damage would be taken. Yes, there was still hope, as long as all the remaining attacks were blocked with perfect guard. Lucario. The next wave is coming. The Saintess wiped the tears from her eyes and stared intently at Gardevoir's movements. Gardevoir. Use all accumulated skill points. Release every Psyshock. Crimson Knight gave the final command. A massive amount of energy began gathering behind Gardevoir. Lucario also assumed a defensive stance. At that moment, not only the commentator, but even the audience in the stands rose to their feet, staring fixedly at this final exchange. It's perfect guard. Lucario used a perfect guard type skill to block the first Psyshock. But the perfect guard window is only 0.33 seconds. President Crimson Knight's Gardevoir has already demonstrated rapid-fire Psyshock before, and it can fire a total of 15 shots. Which means, before Macchiato could finish her commentary, Gardevoir had already fired a barrage of Psyshocks at Lucario. Lucario, follow my rhythm. 1, 2. The Saintess focused completely on the firing rhythm and commanded Lucario. Blue aura erupted across Lucario's entire body. The aura circulated around it and could only last for 0.33 seconds. But the second Psyshock struck that aura. Perfect guard successful. For the third shot, Lucario concentrated the blue aura on the back of its hand and parried the incoming Psyshock. Then came the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Both the Saintess and Lucario had entered a perfect state of flow. And as Lucario blocked more and more Psyshocks, the cheers from the stands grew louder and louder. Finally, the 14th and 15th Psyshocks were completely blocked by Lucario as well. It blocked them. It blocked every single one. Blocking once with a 0.33 second reaction window is already a miracle, but now we've just witnessed that miracle happen 15 times in a row. But Gardevoir's HP is still healthy, and Lucario's skill points are almost depleted. Can it still turn this around? At that moment, the audience's cheers were almost frenzied. But the Saintess was calm. She immediately gave Lucario a new command. Now, extreme speed. Then, gravity aura sphere. Luca. Lucario seized the moment of exhaustion after Gardevoir's ultimate barrage and charged forward. With extreme speed, it grabbed Gardevoir and threw her into the air. Then a heavy aura sphere condensed in Lucario's hand and was thrown onto the open ground where Gardevoir was falling. What followed was a combo performance that dazzled every spectator present. It was so beautiful that after watching it, countless players would want to catch a Lucario for themselves. Even if they were terrible at the game, they would still force their Lucario to learn this exact combo. Gardevoir fell onto the aura sphere and was instantly bounced away. But Lucario appeared ahead of Gardevoir's flight path, striking with Metal Claw and knocking Gardevoir back toward the aura sphere. The next moment, Gardevoir was bounced even farther away. Lucario used Quick Attack to catch up again, then struck her back with another blow. It was like repeatedly spiking a volleyball at the same point, allowing it to build up more and more momentum. No matter how far Gardevoir was knocked away, Lucario predicted the trajectory, intercepted her, and sent her right back to the original position. Finally, Gardevoir was knocked straight out of the arena by the combo. At the same time, her HP hit 0, and she was judged unable to continue. She She won. Lucario blocked every one of Gardevoir's attacks with perfect guard. Then it used a dreamlike combo to drain Gardevoir's remaining HP in one go. I hereby announce that the champion of the first Pokémon League is Miss White Crown and her Lucario. After Macchiato announced the Saintess's victory, the audience became so excited that they could no longer control themselves. They rushed down from the stands and poured into the arena. Well done. The Saintess hugged her Pokémon, but before she could savor the emotion for long, she was surrounded by players. Pro, add me as a friend. Yeah, add me too. How did you do that combo just now? Can you teach me? By the way, what's this Pokémon called? I want to catch one too. At that moment, a massive wave of emotions the Saintess had never felt before began gathering rapidly around her. Adoration, longing, admiration. So this is what it feels like to be admired by the saviors. However, when the crowd of players began asking her questions. Pro, where did you catch this Pokémon? I haven't caught this Pokémon yet, but I still want to learn that combo. The Saintess's gaze swept awkwardly through the crowd. Finally, she saw Carl hiding among the players. Carl pointed directly toward the City of Glory. Carl could sense it. The dream combo the Saintess had just performed would probably become required study for all Lucario trainers from now on. You call yourself a Lucario trainer and you don't know the dream combo? Dear save, dear players. At that moment, the Saintess no longer suppressed her emotions. She raised her voice and shouted. Please follow me to the City of Glory. Take back what belongs to you. My Pokémon was caught in the City of Glory. In any case, surrounded by a huge crowd of Oath players, the Saintess arrived at the gates of the City of Glory. Her eyes met Magard's, who was guarding the city gate. At that moment, the Saintess realized that she could finally say the words she had been holding back for so long with complete confidence. The holy nation has no right to treat me like an ornament. Today, I will take back everything that belongs to me. Chapter 87, Lethal Tempo. The storm is coming. Verdun. The Saintess led a large number of players into the City of Glory inside Crimson Knight's open-world instance. Calling it a breach was not entirely accurate. When the defenders of the Hunter Knights saw a crowd of main game Oath players standing at the city gates behind the Saintess, all wearing expressions that practically said, "Open the gates, or we'll show you exactly where all our top-up money went," Magard made the smart decision. She let them in. Elysium also judged the matter fairly. The city had fallen, and it now belonged to Carl. After the city fell, Carl gained control over various facilities, such as the city gates. However, all of Oath's NPCs inside the city had already been replaced by Imperial soldiers. These soldiers were members of the Imperial Hunter Knights, who had taken over the city's defenses. But to Carl's surprise, the defenders did not actually attack the villagers or Pokémon entering the City of Glory. The Imperial soldiers were far smarter than Oath's official team. At the very least, Magard knew better than to directly clash with the saviors. After all, every player had their own individual open-world instance, and each of those instances contained an intact City of Glory. Now that Crimson Knight's City of Glory had fallen, the loss was only one City of Glory out of tens of millions. Besides, the City of Glory was not an Imperial city. Magard had no reason to risk the Empire's reputation among players to defend a holy nation city. Then, after the massive live audience and livestream viewers witnessed the Saintess's Lucario pull off a miraculous comeback at the very end, Crimson Knight's open-world instance was completely flooded by the crowd. The absurd thing about Oath was that there was no upper limit to the number of players who could enter the same open-world instance. But while there was no online player limit, there were still practical limits at the game design level, such as city capacity and available areas for catching Pokémon and battling. In Carl's view, the ideal format for a Pokémon-style game was a single-player experience. Players, as Pokémon trainers, would encounter all kinds of Pokémon across the world. There would be no need to compete with anyone else. They could simply battle wild Pokémon, catch them, then continue battling and catching more wild Pokémon. Carl truly wanted to fill every player's open-world instance with all kinds of Pokémon right now, letting them catch to their heart's content and experience the purest Pokémon-style gameplay. Unfortunately, he could not do that. In the cities of glory that had not fallen, the defenders would immediately and quietly eliminate any such invasive species. After the Imperial soldiers replaced the original NPCs, the most troublesome part was that they could kill targets without the players even noticing. Still, Carl had no intention of letting so many players cram themselves into Crimson Knight's open-world instance alone. So, under the call and leadership of Crimson Knight and the Saintess, the players who had come for the hype, along with those who felt Crimson Knight's open-world instance was too crowded, began capturing the open-world instances of more than 100 Navigator Guild players. Although Carl wanted to keep expanding and take even more cities of glory, this was already the limit of the forces gathered through the tournament's momentum. In these fallen cities of glory, an average of about 1,000 players were gathered in each one. It was still somewhat crowded, but for the time being, it was enough to satisfy the dreams of those players who had come to become Pokemon trainers. Even so, everything was still far too crude. The players of this world were already used to MMORPG-style gameplay, which involved fighting in the wilderness and competing with others for monsters. On this point, Carl also temporarily added some MMO-style protection mechanics. For example, once a Pokemon battle began, other players could not interfere with the capture or disrupt the process. But this situation would not last for long. Carl naturally hoped they could play in a more relaxed way, with less scheming between players and more pure enjoyment in catching Pokemon. There were two specific ways to achieve that. First, capture more cities of glory. Second, expand the safe zones around the existing fallen cities of glory. Netherworld Village's construction system would be very useful for that. As for how to capture more cities of glory later, the method was simple. Start some drama online. Mio, the moderator of the Oath Leaks forum, also began exerting her influence at this time. She posted a large number of inflammatory threads across various Oath-related social platforms. For example, how does Oath have gameplay that can only be unlocked by paying? Why doesn't my open-world instance have Pokemon catching gameplay? I didn't even make a fuss about the soft ban on villager players before. At least everyone could play in Netherworld Village. But now Pokemon catching gameplay in Oath is whale exclusive. Isn't that going too far? In any case, Oath's official team would definitely be bewildered once they saw all these posts. We don't know anything. Pokemon isn't gameplay we made. Go find Carl, he's the one who made it. However, most of the time, players could not really tell whether a gameplay system was made by Carl or by Oath's official team. They only knew that in the open-world instance of a whale like Crimson Knight, who had spent 200,000, there was a fun new gameplay mode they had never seen before. And now they even had to wait in line and squeeze into Crimson Knight's open-world instance just to play it. For mobile game players, or rather, for most online game players, few things were more insulting than whale-exclusive gameplay. Anyway, once Mio stirred up the drama online, a huge number of Oath players, who had confirmed what seemed to be the truth, began collectively bombarding Oath's official social media accounts and forums. Just like that, a storm of public opinion began to form. Carl let public opinion simmer for a while and shifted his attention to another issue. The resettlement of the refugees from the City of Glory. At that moment, in Netherworld Village in the main world, Oath's official plan to replace all Holy Nation refugees with Imperial soldiers had already begun. From the player's perspective, the NPCs in the City of Glory would not change at all. Only the people playing those NPCs had changed, from Holy Nation refugees to Imperial soldiers. As for the refugees infected with the Calamity Plague who had not received treatment in time, no one cared whether they lived or died. Anon seized this opportunity and, with the help of Miss Reaper Artemis, sent this large wave of refugees to Netherworld Village. The number is larger than I expected. Carl looked at the large group of refugees in his hideout in Netherworld Village. There were at least several 100,000 of them. Normally, they were distributed across the open-world instances of various players, playing different side quest NPCs and earning tiny amounts of emotional antidote from players through the side quests Oath had written for them. Unfortunately, the side quests written by Oath's writers did not seem to move players very effectively. Even side quests like Anon's Flower Girl, which were designed to make players cry, had limited effect, let alone the ordinary scripts these refugees were given. In the beginning, these refugees at least had the Saintess backing them. She would use the happy emotions players gained from gacha pulls to treat them. But now, the Saintess herself could barely protect her own position, and all their jobs had been taken over by Imperial soldiers. Without a doubt, these Holy Nation refugees were now on the brink of death. Their next fate would most likely be to become wild monsters, killed countless times by players after being eroded by the plague. I'm sorry, this is clearly my fault, yet you're the one who has to clean up the mess. In Anon's view, The reason these Holy Nation refugees had been expelled from the City of Glory was because she had silently accepted Oath's changes to the version 2.0 script. But Anon really could not refuse. She knew better than anyone how terrifying the pressure on the abyssal frontier had become. These refugees had been infected with the Calamity Plague precisely because the frontier was constantly collapsing. Between preventing even more refugees from appearing and abandoning this group, Anon had chosen the former. This isn't your fault, and you didn't abandon them, did you? Carl actually had to thank Anon for sending him this batch of NPC resources. He had been worrying about where to find new NPCs to fill various Pokemon-related roles. Thinking of this, Carl wasted no time. He directly created multiple illusionary projections, doing his best to make sure everyone present could hear his voice. Everyone, I am Carl Agata. You don't need to know exactly who I am. You only need to know one thing. Carl's voice spread across the crowd. I can bring you back to the Savior's side. The moment Carl made that promise, a commotion instantly broke out among the refugees. After all, in the eyes of Elysium's natives, being able to come into contact with the Saviors was an incredibly precious opportunity. The emotional antidote produced by the Saviors was, in a sense, even more valuable than contract stones. And if you want to return to the Savior's side, I can offer you two paths. Carl constructed a simple projection screen in front of everyone. Now that Carl's own combat rating had reached 18,000, his illusion abilities had improved greatly. Constructing small illusions like this was effortless for him. The first option is to keep your original human appearance and work as NPCs for Pokemon-related content. For example, Pokemon trainers, Pokemon healers, Pokemon item shopkeepers, and similar roles. Doing this kind of work will not earn you much emotional antidote from the Saviors. The advantage is that the job offers more freedom and fewer restrictions. I recommend this option for those with mild infections. After explaining the first option, Carl changed the projection screen to display various Pokemon. The second option is to become rare Pokemon, also known as shiny Pokemon. If you choose this path, I can grant you a Pokemon-related character core. In other words, I can give you the foundation of that Pokemon's extraordinary power. This was also an extension of the life creation ability granted to Carl by Elysium. After all, every Pokemon was equivalent to a banner character. Their power was simply much weaker than that of actual banner characters, but their growth potential was superior. But the price is that you will be bound by a contract to a certain savior for a long period of time. If you truly cannot adapt, you can apply to terminate the relationship. However, the benefit is that in this form, you can earn a large amount of emotional antidote from the saviors while also possessing a certain degree of extraordinary power yourself. Carl had already explained enough, but out of pure career planning consideration, he added one more thing. I will also open courses to teach you how to become NPCs that saviors like. At the same time, I will launch a related favorability system, allowing saviors to invite you to settle permanently in their villages. After Carl gave them their choices, the Holy Nation refugees quickly began making their decisions. To Carl's surprise, the ratio between those who chose to become ordinary NPCs and those who chose to become Pokemon was about half and half. There were also quite a few people signing up for Carl's course on how to become an NPC loved by players. At that moment, Carl received an emergency call from Sophia of Vengeful Blood. Out of curiosity, Carl temporarily handed the refugee registration process over to Elysium and the Abyssal Knights, then shifted his attention to Vengeful Blood's open-world instance. Chapter 88, City of Glory Falls. Lord Carl, I hope I didn't disturb you by contacting you so suddenly, meow. Sophia, who was currently on Vengeful Blood's side, was still using her silly cat avatar. Until now, she had managed to keep her true identity hidden from Vengeful Blood by constantly drinking shape-shifting potions. After this, however, keeping up the act might become much harder. Vengeful Blood had taken advantage of the mass reshuffle in the City of Glory to bring Sophia back to her own Netherworld village. You should know that with a data capacity like mine, splitting my consciousness into tens of thousands of separate threads is nothing difficult. Carl tossed a shape-shifting potion to Sophia, letting her return to her original form before speaking with him. Tui. After changing back into a human, Sophia spat out several mouthfuls of cat hair. So, what happened on your end? Hasn't Vengeful Blood been enjoying herself quite a bit lately? Carl glanced over Vengeful Blood's recent activity log. She had spent nearly all her time grinding the Trial of Glory and climbing the rankings. With the Abyssal Knights leading a lineup of powerful Pokémon, Vengeful Blood's ranking speed was no different from being launched up the leaderboard. She was now a serious contender for the Trial of Glory Championship. Well, Lady Vengeful Blood is having fun, but she seems to be growing more and more dissatisfied with the City of Glory. The reason is, Sophia began explaining what she had seen. She had been following Vengeful Blood around in her silly cat form, helping her climb the rankings. Because of that, Sophia could tell that although Vengeful Blood was enjoying the Trial of Glory, and although she had plenty to do every day, gathering materials one day and planning which Pokémon to catch and test the next, there was still one thing that deeply bothered her, despite how much fun the Pokémon DLC had brought to the Trial of Glory. It's because of her anonymous identity, isn't it? Even if she wins the Trial of Glory Championship, she can't claim the title as the leader of the Dome Alliance, Carl said, immediately identifying Vengeful Blood's greatest concern. Yes, Sophia nodded quickly. After Lady Vengeful Blood settled me in Netherworld Village, she gathered a group of people and seemed ready to move against the City of Glory. Lord Carl, can you stop her? She's put so much effort into Oath. If she gets restricted because of one impulsive decision, I can't stop her. Besides, I don't think the Oath operators can keep this under control anymore, Carl said. Can't keep it under control. While Sophia was still trying to understand what he meant, Carl showed her a group chat interface that Crimson Knight had shared with him. The title was, Community Campaign to Unlock the City of Glory Pokémon DLC. Players were far more resourceful than Carl had imagined. Perhaps most of them had no idea about the conflict between Oath and Netherworld Village. Even so, the additional Pokémon gameplay had caught the attention of a massive number of players. Then they discovered something important. If they wanted to catch these Pokémon, they could only do so inside certain players' open worlds. As a result, the same question began appearing across various Oath discussion communities and forum posts. How do I unlock the hidden pet catching feature in my open world? Although most players did not understand the underlying mechanics, a few clever ones soon figured something out. As long as enough people gathered at the gates of the City of Glory and demanded that the Pokémon feature be unlocked, catchable Pokémon would begin appearing inside the city. They did not know the exact logic behind it, but the players' initiative was terrifying. Before long, they had formed numerous groups dedicated to pressuring the game into unlocking the Pokémon DLC. Crimson Knight reacted quickly as well. Using her influence, she created several large groups in rapid succession, and now she could direct those players wherever she wanted. I'm afraid Vengeful Blood realized this too. That's probably why she gathered members from her guild to test the waters. Don't worry, nothing serious will happen. Although that Saintess usually acts a little silly. Carl paused for a moment. She has indeed made the Oath operators realize that the players might actually revolt against them. As Carl spoke, he immediately brought Sophia along to watch the spectacle. Meanwhile, on the surface, Vengeful Blood stood at the gates of the City of Glory as the leader of the Dome Alliance. Behind her stood a large crowd of guild members. Although none of them had openly admitted to one another that they were villagers, every player standing there knew the truth. They were all villagers. Macchiato, you and the others. Step forward, Vengeful Blood said to a group of villager players led by Macchiato. Are the guards really not going to attack me? Macchiato was still somewhat afraid of walking openly into the city. A few hours earlier, she had followed a massive crowd into Crimson Knight's open world capital. But that time, there had been tens of thousands of people around her. Now, there were only a dozen or so villager players standing by her side. They're welcome to try, Vengeful Blood said. She crossed her arms and stared coldly at the soldiers guarding the gate. Quote. Macchiato carefully walked up to the two city guards. As expected, the guards instantly raised their spears. Forbidden one. But the moment the guards lifted their weapons, Vengeful Blood and the Dome Alliance players behind her drew theirs as well. In an instant, the atmosphere grew so tense it seemed to freeze solid. Carl, who was watching from afar, thought the Dome Alliance was about to officially go to war with the City of Glory's defenders. Then, at that moment, the guard captain, played by Magard of the Hunter Knights Order, stepped forward and addressed the crowd. Noble saviors, from this day onward, the City of Glory's ban on Forbidden Ones is hereby abolished. The former city lord, who attempted to persecute the saviors, has already been dealt with. No matter what form you saviors take when visiting the City of Glory, please feel free to enjoy every facility within the city. Furthermore, we will issue a formal apology to every savior who was harmed in the past. Faced with overwhelming pressure from the player base, the operators had chosen to back down completely. To Carl, this was not surprising. After all, Pokemon's influence had spread at a terrifying rate. It was not only because of the iconic moments from the first Pokemon League. A huge number of players had been captivated by the Pokemon's adorable appearances simply by visiting Crimson Knight's open world. More importantly, people were less afraid of missing out than they were of being treated unfairly. Why did other players' open worlds get a pet catching feature for no apparent reason, while theirs did not? Carl glanced at the current online trends. The operators had already been flooded with tens of thousands of comments demanding the full release of the Pokemon feature. Even if the Oath operators were extremely unwilling, they had no choice but to back down, open the City of Glory, and allow the Pokemon gameplay to enter the open worlds of players who wanted it. Of course, Pokemon still had many areas that needed optimization. And judging from Magard's cheerful attitude, Carl knew the Empire and the operators must have prepared plenty of traps for him inside the City of Glory. Otherwise, they would never have surrendered ground so easily. In any case, the City of Glory could now be considered fallen as of today. As for how far that fall would go, Carl would have to see what the Oath operators, so-called concession, truly involved. Chapter 89, Allergic to Money. Live, Kiana. That's my final lesson for you. Himeko. Carl had been wondering how Oath's management had backed down so quickly. As it turned out, aside from issuing a public apology, they had changed almost nothing. The official ban on Netherworld Village had not been lifted. If the physical bodies of Netherworld Village players were discovered, they would still be directly restricted. Their so-called concession only allowed Netherworld Village players to enter the City of Glory. At the same time, they officially announced the full release of the pet system. As for that pet system, nobody said it had to use Carl's Pokemon. With that in mind, Carl once again attended an official preview meeting for Oath version 1.5. This time, Carl still went in secret. There were simply too many insiders within Oath leaking information. At this point, Carl could even choose whether to attend with Mio or with Anon. In this situation, Carl naturally chose Mio. After all, he had not forgotten the basic rule of giving players proper emotional value. Mio also loved the feeling of Carl hopping around in her palm while he was in sparrow form. Although Carl always felt that the girl seemed to have an urge to squeeze and torment him whenever he was a sparrow, almost as if he were some kind of squeaky toy. The new character appearing in version 1.5 was Magard, the Empire's main damage dealer. The second half of the version would feature an overlooked male merchant character from the Free Alliance. Generally speaking, this was a transitional update. After version 1.5, the game would jump straight into the major version 2.0 storyline. Originally, according to Oath's official plans, this was supposed to be a fairly dull minor patch. They had intended to skim past it by adding some new Trial of Glory content and calling it a day. Who could have expected this? I never thought there would come a day when I'd sincerely thank Carl Agata. He actually helped me discover a brand new revenue stream. When the Academy head said this, his tone genuinely carried a hint of gratitude. An online game pet system, huh? Carl instantly guessed what Oath's management wanted to do. After all, in the long history of traditional MMOs, pet systems had always been essential features, as well as bottomless money pits. Therefore, while Carl could register protections for certain parts of Pokemon's gameplay and visual designs, the basic structure of a pet system, such as catching, raising, and training pets, had existed in ordinary online games for ages. Anyone could use those ideas. I was originally worried that suddenly adding a pet system would anger the players. But with the current momentum, we can launch it openly and confidently. The Academy head had clearly worked in traditional MMORPG operations before. He knew very well just how many ways there were to monetize even a simple pet system. If Oath really planned to add a large number of paid stat bonuses to the pet system, then Carl would have to thank the Academy head properly. The man truly seemed to feel that Oath was not dying fast enough. However, there were still some rational people on Oath's planning team. Toyama quickly stood up and spoke to the Academy head in a tone that was almost a warning. Boss, the reason Oath was able to stand out from every other game on the market and firmly hold the #1 spot on the popularity charts is precisely because we are a fair game that never sells power. Never sells power. Look me in the eyes and say that again. At that moment, Carl, still in sparrow form, truly felt the urge to transform into Trucken and run over this entire group of developers. But what left Carl unsure whether to laugh or cry was that, in the minds of these developers, and even in the minds of many loyal Oath players, Oath really was considered a fair game that did not sell power. That's true. We have always made money through reputation and goodwill. I really don't know where all this backlash has been coming from lately. The Academy head wore an expression that seemed to say, why can't these people understand our good intentions? Players can clearly enjoy Oath perfectly well without spending any money, and we even made the payment menus so hard to find. In the minds of most players, Oath is practically a game that refuses to make money. So, if we don't sell power through the pet system, where are we supposed to find revenue? Carl had not expected the Academy head to slam the brakes at the last moment. Compared to those old money-hungry MMOs, Oath was indeed a fair game. But only relatively fair. The fun of a pet system lies in catching pets. How about we place a limit on daily catches? For example, 80 catches per day. Players who want extra attempts can buy contract stones, Toyama immediately suggested, finding a key monetization route. 80 times a day is too many. Change it to 80 times a week, like a weekly dungeon. Besides selling extra catches, we can also add some attempts to the current Battle Pass as a player benefit, the Academy head added. The Battle Pass was the usual kind of pass or monthly card found in ordinary games, where players could unlock various extra rewards by grinding. Perhaps in the Academy head's eyes, making the catch limit reset weekly instead of monthly was already extremely generous. And on top of that, they were even adding extra rewards to the Battle Pass. Right, since we're doing this, let's give the players some extra benefits in version 1.5. We'll run a cumulative spending event. The threshold doesn't need to be too high. A total spend of $280 will give players a limited time skin for the current event, along with some shiny pets, the Academy head said. No problem. Also, regarding Hasumi's rerun. At this point, Toyama glanced at the rerun character list. It was about time for Hasumi to have a rerun in the second half of version 1.5, which happened to be paired with an ignored male limited character. Rerun. What value does a trader have in a rerun? I originally planned to give her away for free in version 2.0 to boost player engagement, but let's just take the hit and move it up to version 1.5. The character the Academy head likely hated most was Hasumi. Although the Saintess had only recently betrayed them, the Saintess's IP value still belonged to Oath on the surface. Later, Oath's management could have the Saintess's younger sister play her role and release an SP version, which would let them squeeze plenty of money out of players who liked the Saintess. But Hasumi had run off to Netherworld Village together with her entire character value. Now Hasumi was deeply tied to Netherworld Village. Basically every player had received help from Mama Hasumi when they first arrived there. Because of that, the Academy head now wished he could simply delete Hasumi as a character. A rerun. Let Hasumi earn another wave of revenue to help build up the beautiful Netherworld Village. Absolutely not. Anyway, she's a launch era character from version 1.0. Even if we give her away for free, I doubt many players will want to use her now. The Academy head made the final decision. Just give her away for free when version 1.5 launches. Only the base unit. Don't even think about including her signature weapon. From now on, don't bring up Hasumi reruns again. Giving away a launch limited character will also help new players get through the early game more smoothly, Toyama said, agreeing with the decision from an operations perspective. Looking at it this way, the benefits we're giving out in version 1.5 are actually quite generous. Combined with the brand new gameplay, this should carry us all the way to version 2.0 and push our online player count to a new record. When the Academy head made this decision, he might have genuinely believed he was being incredibly generous. They were giving players free catch attempts every week. The Battle Pass rewards were practically free too, costing only $9.52. Very affordable. The cumulative spending event was also a benefit. Players would get so many valuable rewards for just $280. A limited character who had been unbeatable during the launch period was now being given away for free. In Oath's eyes, they were practically allergic to making money. From this point onward, Hasumi might truly become the character with the highest ownership rate in all of Oath. She would be everywhere, as common as a starter unit. Looking at it this way, Hasumi had truly been abandoned by Oath completely, even more thoroughly than the Saintess had been. However, Carl had plans to release an SP version of Hasumi. That SP version was where Carl intended to completely rework Hasumi's combat style, making her kit far more enjoyable to play. When that time came, combined with Oath's current decision to give Hasumi away for free, Hasumi likely would no longer care about her status within Oath at all. Chapter 90. The Big Dogs. At that moment, Mio typed a short message to Carl, voicing her concern. Speaking of which, the Oath developers are planning to release a pet system too. Are we really not going to do anything about it? Well, first of all, the point of making a game is to let players have fun. It isn't to obsess over crushing the competition before the game is even finished. If Oath hadn't gone out of its way to block Netherworld Village at every turn, I wouldn't even bother with them. In his sparrow form, Carl used his tiny claws and beak to type, replying at lightning speed. So as long as Oath stops trying to trip us up, we don't need any special countermeasures. Besides, their pet system has an 80 capture weekly limit. All I can say is that only Oath's most loyal players could stomach something like that. Carl genuinely had no interest in paying attention to the pet system Oath was launching. But Oath not trying to sabotage a competitor. How could that possibly happen? Just as Carl's message appeared in front of Mio, the pre-battle meeting moved on to the real issue. Regarding Netherworld Village and the ecological invasion caused by the Pokémon, the Empire has provided us with a solution. We invite Lady Calamity of the Empire to explain the details. At that point, Toyama introduced a figure who was terrifying in the truest sense. Anon was the first to react. Her expression instantly became more serious than ever before. A second later, a crimson spatial rift tore open in the center of the meeting room. From it stepped a mature, strikingly beautiful woman with a figure so flawless that Carl did not even know how to describe it. It has been a long time, Lady Anon of the Abyssal Knights. Our last meeting was during the Third Grey Tide campaign, when we fought together on the border, wasn't it? I would rather not see you at all. Anon's gaze flicked toward Carl, who was hidden inside Mio's sleeve. She was likely staying alert in case the woman before her tried to make a move against him. Don't be so cold. On the contrary, I'm rather curious about that adorable appearance of yours. If the saviors prefer that kind of look, I might consider meeting them in a younger form as well. This being known as Calamity seemed to know what Anon's original human form looked like. Anon's cheek twitched non-stop. She had clearly realized the other woman was mocking her. Countless curses were probably running through her mind, but this was not the place to shout them. However, from the cryptic banter between Anon and Calamity, the kind of exchange only old acquaintances would share, Carl could tell that this Lady Calamity was likely a powerhouse on Anon's level. One of the Empire's 10 Archons and commander of the Calamity Legion. What brings you all the way to this remote academy town? Anon took the opportunity to indirectly inform Carl of the woman's identity. Remote, everyone knows this is where the saviors who decide the fate of the world gather. And what about you? A veteran like you stole the version 2.0 spotlight from our second Imperial Princess, and now you're accusing me of neglecting my duties. Calamity said. Carl roughly understood. The original featured character plan for Oath's version 2.0 was supposed to be the Empire's second Imperial Princess. This second Imperial Princess, much like the Saintess of the Holy Nation, was likely a character the Oath developers had designed long ago. Just as Carl had explained when he first entered Paradise Academy, although these pre-designed characters had their own lives in the world of Elysium, just like the natives, and had truly grown up there, their life experiences, appearances, and powers had all been given to them by Oath's developers. In any case, the more Carl interacted with Elysium, the more he felt that this world was essentially similar to the digital world. It was called a digital world, but by now, it was no different from a real alternate world. This Madame Calamity, however, was a true native powerhouse. She existed outside Oath's official plans. Like Anon, she was the kind of powerhouse the developers would have to spend a fortune to recruit onto a banner. So, why are you here? Anon clearly had no patience for small talk with this woman. Don't worry, I'm not here to steal your banner slot. I'm only here to provide the headmaster's side with a little pet support. As Calamity spoke, she snapped her fingers. Countless spatial rifts instantly appeared behind her, and from them emerged beings that made both Carl and Anon feel genuinely troubled. A large number of Oath native monsters that had been tamed by the Empire. Our Empire has had a tradition of training battle companions since ancient times. If this number still fails to satisfy the Savior's needs, we can even have our soldiers consume shapeshifting potions and play the role of even more powerful battle pets. Calamity's gaze swept across the room before landing on Mio. More accurately, she locked eyes with Carl and continued speaking. Every battle pet we provide to the headmaster's side is top tier in both strength and data volume, to say nothing of the ones played by our soldiers. Since the saviors love pets so much, I'm sure they'll be very fond of them. Furthermore, this is survival of the fittest. The natural ecological cycle. As for the Pokemon released into the city, if they are too weak and end up hunted and devoured by the Empire's battle pets, then that is simply nature taking its course. The saviors wouldn't mind too much, would they? So this was your true goal all along. At that moment, Carl truly realized the scale of the threat. The reason the Oath officials and the Empire had been willing to back down so quickly and allow the Pokemon into the city was because they had already seen through the Pokemon's weakness. Their average data volume hovered around only a few hundred. But this large batch of battle pets brought by the Empire had an average data volume of 2 to 3,000. The battle pets played by soldiers could even reach 7 to 8,000. If the Pokemon in this massive group of Imperial battle pets lived in the same city and were allowed to fight freely, the Pokemon would become nothing more than food for those pets. They would be chewed up by the bigger beasts. As for the players, they still would not be able to tell which creatures were Netherworld Village Pokemon and which were Imperial battle pets. Although the Pokemon's appearances were protected by copyright, the Empire could still use shapeshifting potions to redesign Oath-native monsters into cute forms. Even if they were Oath-native monsters, players would still be delighted to catch them. It was total ecological suppression. This was truly a brilliant move. That concludes all the arrangements for version 1.5. Everyone will be busy from here on out. Let us welcome the official arrival of version 1.5. After the headmaster spoke those words with an air of absolute confidence, the pre-battle meeting adjourned. Mio immediately took Carl back to Netherworld Village, and Anon followed them to discuss a countermeasure. The simplest method is to establish safe zones. In more academic terms, ecological reserves. Carl spoke to Anon with an extremely grave expression. I'll ask major guild players who have Oath accounts, such as Miss Vengeful Blood, to clear out the Imperial War beasts in specific open worlds. We may also need members of the Abyssal Knights to disguise themselves as powerful wild Pokemon, such as legendary, pseudo-legendary, or mythical Pokemon, and secretly drive the Imperial War beasts out of those open worlds. Anon shrugged at Carl's request. After all, the Abyssal Knights had already become addicted to playing Pokemon. Last time, by acting as rental Pokemon, they had earned quite a bit of emotional antidote from the players' cheers. They had been worrying that they might not get another chance to keep playing Pokemon and having fun with the players. Of course, I don't expect us to establish reserves in every player's open world. For now, we'll start with the open worlds of popular players like Crimson Knight and Vengeful Blood. After making a few brief arrangements, Carl moved straight to the most critical part of the problem. But establishing reserves only treats the symptoms, not the cause. To put it bluntly, the Pokemon's data volume is too low. They simply can't compete with the Empire's battle pets. I can't guarantee anything for wild Pokemon, but for Pokemon trained by players, it's time to design an additional growth or evolution path. In Carl's design, these Pokemon would first battle each other in the City of Glory to increase their data volume. Then they would head into the wild, fight Oath-native monsters, and devour their data volume. But simply leveling up would not be enough. Carl planned to design even more explosive evolution methods for the Pokemon, so that in the future, when they faced those clawing, snarling Oath-native monsters, they could crush them outright. Do you mean Mega Evolution and Dynamax? Mio asked curiously. In their daily lives, Mio often discussed game design ideas with Carl, and these two evolution methods were things Carl had mentioned to her before. Those are evolution methods within the Pokemon system. In the future, once Oath players have access to their pet system, they will definitely use Oath-native monsters in battle. We also need to give Pokemon a form that fits Oath's core gameplay. As Carl spoke, he sent an invitation to Hasumi, Griff, and the Saintess, the three banner characters who could already be considered Netherworld Village employees. It might be hard to explain clearly with words alone. Everyone, come with me to a player's open world. I'll show you another form of Pokemon evolution there. The open world Carl invited everyone to was none other than Kyo's. Kyo had not shown himself recently. He had not been climbing the Trial of Glory rankings, nor had he been participating in the Pokemon League. The reason was that he had been attempting a truly insane challenge. He was trying to defeat all the powerful monsters in the Trial of Glory, such as the Abyssal Knights in the Flamed Sword Dragon, using nothing but a shovel. When Carl and the others arrived in Kyo's open world, he was holding a shovel and locked in a true one-on-one duel with an Abyssal Knight he had captured. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested, patreon.com/blownleaves. To be continued.